Get the stream started first. Yep.
Yeah, I want to make sure that's working. Wakey, wakey. All right, we got an excellent connection.
Joe, put your mask on.
It's upstairs. I should probably keep my spare here next to my chair, though.
Those are illegal in Texas.
Different mask, Bill.
Oh.
Talking about a CPAP mask.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
You got sleep apnea, Joe?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, let's go off on that tangent.
I've had a CPAP machine for 13 years? 13 years.
Yeah. No, I used to have it. I used to have sleep apnea.
How do you used to have apnea?
Because for me, it was weight related. So once I lost some weight, it went.
Yeah.
My wife has it. My wife isn't. Hers is not weight related. Hers is because she's had chronic tonsillitis from when she was a child. So so she gets it. So she has the CPAP mask and everything.
Well, I've had this since I weighed 185 pounds. So
yeah, I think so.
Okay, we're ready. We're doing 3, 2, 1 record. That's when you turn on your recording. And then after 25 seconds, because we're still locked into the way that Tony liked it, then we do a 3, 2, 1, 0. We all say 0 at the same time.
We're quiet.
So we did that for noise
seconds.
cancellation.
Right. Correct.
It's really odd for us to be quiet for that long.
Yeah, it is.
It's odd for anybody.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, record. Okay, someone had a tapping noise early, but
it sounded like a drive-by shooting is what it sounded.
It was Majid. I could see his mic popping up.
It's
all right.
Zeros, so there's fireworks outside. That's
yes. Right. Oh, that's cool. Happy Diwali,
we got a good
everybody.
15 seconds though. It was okay.
Yep, we did. All right. Zeros. 3, 2, 1, 0.
0.
Hey, that was really good. All right, over to Majid.
Oh yeah,
Majid, host. Start the show.
Just start with the for today's innards. Oh.
Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community.
No.
We told him to do the header and then do the innards.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Well, that means I've got more to move around. If he just says,
"Oh, okay," just say,
yeah.
"Let's do innards," and then we'll do the headers after the.
Right.
Okay. So, in our innards section, we have a great interview with YouTuber Infinity Galactic. Hi, Blaine from Infinity Galactic. Nice for you to come on at this unearthly hour for you over in Australia.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm relatively caffeinated, so we're good to go.
Makes two of us. Welcome to mintCast, Blaine.
Thank you. Welcome. So good to be here.
Yeah, and as I said, thanks a lot for, taking time out to come on. So, yes, you've had this channel, Infinity Galactic. It's been going on for a while now. Just wanted to ask, how did you end up on Linux?
Yeah, look, I'll give you the short story because otherwise that could take up the first, 20 minutes here. But basically the story was that as a teenager, I was really into videography and I was learning to edit videos. I was very jealous of my granddad that had a Mac with iMovie and eventually I got Final Cut on there. But I didn't have anywhere near the money to afford a Mac. And so I ended up looking into how to run Mac on my Dell PC tower at the time. That turned out to be a royal pain in the butt. And even though I got it working, it didn't work for very long. But that very difficult experience gave me the requisite skill set to make other operating systems other than Windows a possibility. And so it wasn't long before I stumbled across Kdenlive as a video editor that was, free and open source and available on Linux. So that started me asking, well, what's this whole Linux thing about? And once I fell down that rabbit hole, then I was just like burning through distros like crazy, just trying to find one that I liked and, customizing it and doing all the things that new Linux users do, making a lot of mistakes, hosing a lot of systems, and doing all that. And eventually it got to the point where I was like, okay, well, I think I figured this out now, at least for video editing. I feel like I've learned a fair bit in the process. And then that was kind of the impetus to start a YouTube channel. So really, it came down to me being broke and enjoying making videos as a teenager, and that introduced me to the world of free software and eventually into Linux.
That's
About
actually
when
a
was
story I
that?
can. Sorry, I was just going to say that's a story I can relate with because it was very similar for me in that I wanted, I was a bit envious of people with Macs. Didn't want to say that, obviously. Always wanted to say that I was better somehow, and so this was my way around it. Sorry, Eric, you were saying.
I was just curious. So when roughly was that, and then what did you find was sort of the preeminent distribution for you at that point, and then maybe desktop environment, just real rough kind of that experiment you went through. I think a lot of us did, where it's sort of like, oh, this is Linux, but it's not one thing like Windows or Mac. There's all this stuff out there. Okay, well, let's go try it all. And so,
Yeah. At the time, I had a very poor internet connection, not because we couldn't get a decent one. It was just that my folks didn't see the point in having one. And so I was reliant on the distributions that came on the front of magazines. Now, this makes me sound like I'm maybe a bit older than I actually am, but this would have been around, I think around 06, 07 that I started like really looking into Linux as a teenager. And so I think some of my first experiences with Linux that I remember is like booting up live CDs that came on, on the front of these magazines. And so some of them would include, I think, the Ubuntu Intrepid Ibex. So the one that came after Hardy Heron, I remember booting up that one for the first time and being like, ooh, coffee stains, that's interesting. The wallpaper at the time was very brown, and like if you squinted, you could kind of see an ibex in it. And the other one that I had like the full fat DVD version of was OpenSUSE 11.2. Interestingly enough, that was I was put onto that by finding an episode of the Linux Action Show, which was hosted by Brian Lunduke and Chris Fisher. And they were doing this episode where they reviewed Windows 7 when that had come out in, I think, 2009, or it was getting close to coming out. And then they had also talked about OpenSUSE 11.2, and I was blown away by KDE 4 and everything that could do. So I spent a bit of time with OpenSUSE. That's a difficult one to cut your teeth on when you're brand new to it. The one that I actually installed, went ahead and did the whole installation process. The very first one was, not surprisingly, Linux Mint 8, I think. So I can still picture the wallpaper, but that was the one that I just felt the most comfortable in. And so that was the one that was installed on my hardware. Prior to that point, I think I was just sort of messing around in virtual machines or booting off live CDs, live DVDs.
Now,
I honestly
your
can't remember what the
computer-
question was, but I think I've...
was it your computer, or did you have to hijack the family computer to do this?
Yes. No, it was my computer. At that point,
Okay.
I think I had a tower that I'd bought. And then I think in my last 2 years of school, I think I'd also bought myself a laptop. So I had plenty of machines that I could foul up without too many consequences.
Got it.
KDE 4 was the one that kind of pushed me away from KDE. KDE 3 was great.
Yeah, well,
KDE
see,
4 had a lot of drag problems and a lot of bug problems until like really late in the process, just before they went to 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if I had been introduced to KDE 3 first, I probably would have felt that way as well. I think I was so like one of the push factors that pushed me away from Windows was just how bloated Vista felt on my laptop. I didn't have very high end hardware, but it wasn't terrible hardware. And I just couldn't believe how clunky Windows Vista felt after a certain amount of time being installed on hardware, and I was like, man, there's got to be something that's more efficient than this. So even relative to Windows Vista and Windows 7 was an improvement, but it was still, all of the Linux distributions just felt way faster than anything Windows was doing at the time. So even though I ended up learning later on that KDE4 was very polarizing. Like some people really liked the look and the feel of it, and the oxygen theming and all that kind of thing. And the animations were pretty snazzy. But yeah, I learned that there was a lot of like functionality that got lost in that KDE3 to KDE4, and it really didn't come back around, or at least that community felt like they were still a bit pushed away by it until, you're right, the end of KDE4, maybe even KDE5, Plasma 5.
And now we're looking at Plasma 6 on the near horizon.
Yeah.
I remember having that same kind of feeling when it came to GNOME, because when I got into Linux, it was after GNOME 3 had launched, so I never used GNOME 2. And I think, yes, if I had been in that cohort of people who were using GNOME 2, I would have been annoyed as well when it moved over. But yes, I see what you mean, that because you whenever, whatever opinions you have, it's always based upon your past experiences, isn't it? And your past experiences inform what kind of views you have in the future. You've already mentioned a couple of distros, and it sounds like you're the oldest Mint user here, probably, apart from Moss, maybe. Oh, actually, no, Eric. Oh, it's Eric. Okay. What other distros have got a special place in your heart, shall we say? Saying favorite is difficult to say, I think, but something that has more like, you have fond memories of, or, something that you have a connection with.
For sure. I'd say the heavy rotation of distros over the years. Look, like Ubuntu is definitely high up there. I think for me, even though I was running, even though I'm pretty sure that Linux Mint 8 was the first distribution that I was actually using as a daily driver on my laptop, Ubuntu 10.04, that felt like a breath of fresh air, just in terms of, that was when Ubuntu went through the rebrand and they kind of moved away from the brown colors and went into kind of the purple and whatever. And that felt like a really cool distro. So like Ubuntu 10.04 specifically, that LTS release, that's got a very special place in my heart. I think these distributions that I was exposed to early on still hold a bit of sway for me. I would say more recently, I think Fedora has added to that list between, Linux Mint, Ubuntu, OpenSUSE. Fedora's definitely jumped on that list. Honestly, Elementary OS, I had a real, I've got a lot of love for that project. And it's difficult in that I really liked the Mac OS-ness of it. And obviously it was the one thing that Elementary kept getting a lot of flack for in the Linux world, was being too similar to Mac OS.
Danny is still telling us that she's not planning to make that look like Mac OS. We had her on just about a month ago, I think.
No, I saw that. Yeah, I listened to a bit of that. I still really like that project for everything that's that's done for kind of the design and polish of the user experience and the thoughtfulness that goes into that process. That really, that's really impressive to me. At the same time, I would say that I think there's probably been a few stints where I've run Elementary OS for a extended period of time. And I think half of that was just because it was so impressive design-wise that, people would always ask, oh, what's that? Is that Mac? No, it's not Mac. Oh, what is it then? And then it was always like a cool conversation piece going through, university and that kind of thing. So I think those five probably, Ubuntu, Fedora, OpenSUSE, Mint, and Elementary, they're probably the ones that I've rotated through the most over the years.
Bill, notice he didn't mention Arch in there. Just thought I'd say that.
Well, considering what he likes about all these OSs, I was going to say something about maybe using Garuda.
So, yeah, I don't know. I can't remember if I've mentioned it before, but I do use Arch.
Really? Do you use Arch? You use Arch, do you?
By the way,
Oh my god. I didn't know about this at all.
Just like nobody knows I
surprised.
like Bodhi.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Have you tried Arch much? Have you gone down that rabbit hole at all? What's
I
your
have gone
experience
down
with
that rabbit hole. Well, actually, it really was once the channel was up and going, and I was trying all of these different projects. Like, it was only a matter of time before I went down that rabbit hole, and I did spend some time there. Like, I did a couple of videos on Gen 2. I did a couple of videos on Arch, and to me, it just became a question of like the ability to tinker and change and customize and tweak things with both of those distributions. I understand that they've got their own perks and pros and cons, but the ability to be able to change whatever you like and be able to configure things down to the nth degree was a really fun learning process in that I genuinely actually did enjoy it. Like, I didn't get frustrated by it or ready to throw things out the window. I could see the functionality or the utility in it. I think it was that over time I was like, at the end of the day, though, I just don't want to be spending this much time doing it. And so I would end up like, and I think also I'm a sucker for like a preconceived like
a well curated
project. Yeah, well curated. That's the word I'm looking for. A well curated experience. And like I'm going to end up changing a few things anyway. But I think if somebody who thinks about this stuff and is passionate about it, serves up a project and goes, here's what I think a cool desktop could be. I'm like, yeah, cool. Let me try it out. Whereas like the build it yourself approach is like, now I got to make a bunch of decisions, and then that would always be, something that I was just like, yeah, well, that was fun, but I don't think I'll do that again. So, having said that, though, I did like just over the course of time, like I've spent just a bit of time here and there with distributions that are based off Arch. So, like Endeavour OS, when that came out, I kicked the tires with that for a while. Obviously, Manjaro isn't really technically based on Arch, but that was running on some of my hardware for some time there. Haven't been there recently, but yeah. So it's not completely unfamiliar, but definitely the probably the Deb package world is more familiar to me, and so it's more comfortable, and I kind of trend back that way. With occasional dips into RPM world with Fedora and OpenSUSE.
So
that,
you don't do a lot
out
with
of Linux. That kept me out of Linux for quite a while there, when all I had was Red Hat 5 and Slackware to play with, and you had to know the serial number of every card in your computer, and I just didn't want to do that. Mandrake 8 was the first one that got me, and that also had KDE 3. Anyhow,
right. Oh, Mandriva, I've completely forgot about that one. Yeah,
I'm a fan of Open Mandriva.
Yep.
So what's your opinion on like Flatpak, App Image, and Snaps?
Yeah, actually, that's and I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but actually, that was one of the main things that surprised me after my hiatus. Like I say hiatus as if it's one thing. I've actually taken like multiple breaks, but like there was one that was quite lengthy, and that was one thing that really surprised me coming back from my hiatus was that, oh my gosh, we might be on the edge of nirvana here. We've actually figured out universal packages, and so when I was looking into the differences and some of the discussion between Snap and Flatpak and App Image and the rest of them, I was genuinely surprised that all of this technology was all coming around or becoming more present all at the same time. It seemed like we went from having Deb and RPM wars to I come back on the scene and suddenly there's like 3 or 4 different options of universal ones that you could install on basically anything. So like personal preference wise, I think I've had the most success with Flatpak and FlatHub. That seems to have won the war of the hearts and minds in terms of me personally. But there are use cases where I've used Snap for specific things. And there are use cases where I've used app images. I think a good example of that is the video editor that I still use today with Caden Live. I've found that the app image of Caden Live is the most stable version, and so I think that's literally the only app image that I use on a daily basis now. But yeah, I use that. The rest of the time, I'm pretty happy or can find most things that I need on Flatpak. If I'm in Ubuntu land, like if I'm using Ubuntu specifically, then I'll kind of check in with snaps and see how they're doing, and just run as many snaps as I can just to get a feel for how that's going. But yeah, I think that's where I land with all of that.
So how long now have you had your channel? I remember watching it years ago.
Yeah. I think so. The very first video that I uploaded was in November of 2010. So,
Wow.
yeah, so, that's 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. And have you always used Caden Live as your video editor for that?
Pretty much, on the whole, yes. There's been a few stints where I've used like DaVinci Resolve. I did have a Mac in my kit of gear for a while, and so I used Final Cut on a few of the projects. But yeah, I would say I'm going to say 85 to 90% of the videos on that channel are Caden Live.
So how long does it normally take for you to, film, edit, make a whole video?
Yeah, I think it always depends on the complexity of the project. But I would say as an average, I feel like if it's a fairly straightforward project with, a roll from the camera and screen capture and that kind of thing, I would say if I am in the rhythm of it and I don't have any glaring technical issues, it's usually, I would say, between 4 and maybe 5 or 6 hours in total of like idea to hitting publish on YouTube.
That's for a what length video?
That's probably, I think most of my videos will average between sort of 8 and 15 minutes, I think. And some of them can go a bit longer than that, but yeah, usually somewhere in there.
And how many videos do you put out a week or a month? Or
there's only one video a week if I'm lucky.
I don't think a lot of people realize how much work goes into making one 8 to 15 minute video and 4 to 5 hours worth of work, sometimes more.
Yeah. I think it's something that I recognized early on in the process. Or when I say early on, I think I was about, I think I was 4, maybe 5 years into the channel, and I kind of had a little mini fork in the road where the channel was doing well and it had some decent momentum behind it, and I was starting to get a few sort of paid sponsors and that sort of thing, and also the idea of being a YouTuber as a profession was becoming more well established, and I had sort of a window of opportunity there where I think if I had sown more time into the channel, I could have kind of taken it on a little bit further and gone full time or at least part time to extend it out to full time. But I think at the end of the day, it was something that I enjoyed way more as a hobby, as like a side thing that I do in addition to kind of a day job. And I just discovered that I was way too sort of people oriented to for the daily grind to be coming up with video ideas and shooting videos, and it would have been a long time before I could afford working with a team per se. And so yeah, it was just something that I kind of went, all right, well, this has been fun and all, but like I got to go and get a real job, or spend more time doing a real job. And and I think that's kind of been where YouTube has stayed for me for the last almost what are we looking at? That was probably 8 or 9 years ago now. So so YouTube for me now is very much in the hobby basket, which is why I've taken multiple breaks, sometimes 3 to 6 months at a time without posting, just because the demands of family and work and everything else just pick up, and
you got to rotate those habits too.
Yeah, that's it.
that was actually one of my questions about the pressure you might have felt at some point where you get a bit of momentum, you have people coming to you for interviews, or maybe could you feature my application, or getting requests to do things. And I've sort of gone through that. I got up to about 2,500 subscribers, and so many thousands of views and all this stuff, and I kind of felt that same pressure where it was like, what am I doing with this? Because I started with literally just making how-to videos on like how to fix problems. And that's always been my forte. All of my most popular videos are that subject, not me pontificating about my feelings, or it was just very technical, like here's a problem, here's how you fix it. And that's just been my background in IT and everything else. So I think that's my strength. And I recognize that in order to grow, it was going to be a lot of that sort of like, do I have to make these stupid thumbnails with me going, and like, do I have to follow the, post a video every couple days, and like this whole, constant pressure to like produce. And like, it took all the fun out of it, to the point where I just said, I'm not going to do this at all anymore. And literally, I haven't posted a video for a couple years now, but I still have a pretty decent subscriber base, and I still have people watching my videos and asking me questions. So the validity is there of the stuff that I did. It's just, it was so hard to separate it and make it a hobby, and make it just be like, okay, this is a fun thing I do when I feel like doing it. And I know that pressure was probably mostly myself, putting that pressure on myself, but like, it was a real thing. And I wanted to ask you, like, and you just explained, like, you definitely had that moment where you thought, well, maybe I'll do this. But the reality is it's so hard to make any real money doing it. The ad revenue is next to nothing. And so if you don't have sponsors, and then you got to chase all that around, and it becomes like a big deal. Like you said, you'd have to spend a lot of time doing it. So it's interesting that you kind of looked over that precipice and then just sort of said, maybe not. So
Are you still a one-man team, Blaine? You did talk about teams before, and I thought I'd
Yeah. I think, again, when I was looking over that precipice, to use your term from before, I considered, and I even had kind of offers of like people that could do the editing for me and that kind of thing, and I just realized that if I ended up going down that route of going, okay, we're going to up the amount of videos that we're making, it really comes down to like, you got to have a lot of ideas. And it was just something that while I really enjoyed the world and the content that I was making and the topics that I was talking about, I think I only enjoyed it because of the fact that it was driven mostly by my own interest. And I realized that at a certain point, you end up chasing the hamster wheel of the algorithm and what your audience wants. And there is still an element of that even today. Like, and we can circle back around to, the recent Linux Mint videos, because there's a bit of a rationale behind that too. But at the end of the day, in my mind anyway, in order for content to be interesting for your audience, and in order for it to be interesting, for you, there sort of has to be a meeting in the middle between what content you like making and what content your audience likes watching. And that can become maddening if you try and, chase what your audience wants forever. Because you realize that at the end of the year, you're just like, I'm so burnt out creatively. And yeah, the extra admin that you end up picking up in order to, maintain sponsorships or a Patreon or whatever it is. And like, having said that, like, I've seen many YouTubers come and go, and I've seen, YouTubers in our space in the Linux niche really succeed. And so, I'm like, well, hats off, if you've managed to figure out that process and you're growing that as a business and as a company, and, you're doing all of those things, then well done. Like, lots of respect for growing that. But yeah, it's just not my thing. And I definitely enjoy this space as a hobby. And I think I'll, keep plugging away when I have the inspiration to do so.
You mentioned, and this is true, 5 years ago or so when I started, maybe 6 at this point, it didn't feel like there were very many large open source and Linux YouTubers. I mean, there were a few, But now it's amazing. I'm discovering these channels on a regular basis with 25,000 subscribers, 50,000 subscribers, and maybe their primary focus isn't Linux necessarily, or distro hopping or doing these different things, but they're using open source software to develop software, to administer servers or whatever sort of job they're doing. And it's just amazing how prevalent. We judge Linux adoption by sort of the downloads or the number of desktops, and it's 3%, it's 4%. But the truth is that there's so much interest in it now comparatively to just 5 years ago, that it's amazing to me to just stumble across these people, and it's like, wow, here's another channel, with
and the
so
distros are so much
interest.
better too, Eric. The
Well, all of
distros
it's just so much better,
improved to where anyone
Yeah.
could just pick it up and play with it.
Well, so Blaine saying that he went with Linux Mint, I mean, I think of the progression of, I was in Debian to start, and then Ubuntu came along and made getting Debian up and running that much easier. So it was like, okay, yeah, this is perfect. It just gives me a working GNOME 2 desktop that I just start using. I don't have to mess with my video card or any of this stuff. It just sort of works because the hardware support was so good. But there was that lack of codecs. And so Linux Mint came along and said, hey, here, you can now play all your content, your media files and all this stuff, and watch anything you want. And we just make it easy to do that. And oh, by the way, here's this Cinnamon desktop that's kind of and it's been that sort of progression. You mentioned Fedora. Fedora was very difficult to use for me for a long time. And then recently in the 30s series, it's been amazing. They put so much effort on that experience. So yeah, it's always interesting to me to hear someone who's sort of going through that same progression. But you mentioned the Linux Mint videos, and that sort of brought me back around to watching some of your content. I haven't recently, but yeah. So what was your thinking in this, or you're saying you had some sort of strategy behind that, maybe?
A little bit. I think what it was that over the last kind of 9 months, I think the last video that I had posted was one about Elementary OS 7 when that came out, or maybe an update to Elementary 7 OS 7. Either way, it was like way back at the start of 2023. And I hadn't posted anything since. And the entire time that I hadn't posted anything, I had just been plunking away with Mint, and didn't have the time or the interest or whatever to change. And so after coming back and going like, I feel like I want to make another video, I realized that for a lot of people in my position, and I think that one of the weirdest juxtapositions or one of the weirdest paradoxes with me as a Linux enthusiast is that I don't have any programming or development experience or know-how at all. Like, I'm not a system admin, I'm not somebody who codes, I'm not any of that. And so so there's lots of interest in Linux from that angle, but I think I've always tried to make videos that are more for the everyday user, whatever that means. And so I realized that if there was a project that I could consistently recommend to new users, I always felt like in the past there were projects that I could, temporarily kind of go, wow, this is a great release, or this is a great project, or whatever. But there was always there'd always be a little bit of a caveat that 6 months later, oh, okay, they've kind of gone a different direction, or, or the company that has a huge share in that project's, financial base or whatever is doing some goofy stuff. And so it would always come with a bit of a caveat of like, okay, well, I can endorse this for new users temporarily, but then down the road, okay, maybe not. And what I realized was that just after running the same install of Mint for so long and it just being that good, I was like, surely there are plenty of other people who are in a similar boat that have been using this distribution for a long time, or who are looking around at what are the genuine options here for replacing Windows on the desktop. And what if I just made a couple of videos that just spoke to that specifically? And so, yeah. And part of it comes from the fact that there are a lot of videos on Linux Mint. There's a lot of interest in Linux Mint as a project. You look at how much people are Googling what and how much people are searching on YouTube for what. And yeah, like algorithmically, Linux Mint does come up a lot. So, you know, part of it is like, well, you know, if you're going to talk about something, you may as well pick something that a lot of people are interested in. And it just so happened to align with, you know, what I'd been enjoying for the last, you know, year and a bit. Yeah, so, you know, here we are. That the video, my second video back after that sort of 6-7 month break, I think thereabouts. The second video I made was that Linux Mint video about why I think it's the best desktop Linux distribution for average people. And yeah, and that really resonated well.
Are you
it got
calling
picked up.
us average?
From it.
Sorry, what was that?
Over each other.
I said, are you calling us average?
I think it's true though, because I can give Mint to somebody that just might have come from, oh my gosh, normal people, you know, Windows XP, Windows 7, whatever, and they just get on fine with it, especially if they don't have any really complicated needs for it. You know, if they just need to get online and pay their bills, do some shopping, maybe a
I
little
think that's
bit
why
of,
a lot of people find it comfortable, is because
Yeah.
of how closely it looks. It resembles XP or 7, or even, you know, what people did to 8 to make it look like 7.
And doesn't give you any hiccups on the road, and everything works. And if it doesn't work, it's really easy to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
there's
it's a good,
enough.
strong, stable base.
It's the one that I always hear. Yeah, well, I set my dad up on Mint, you know, and I haven't heard from him in 6 months, so I guess everything's okay on that front, you know, that kind of thing. And that's been the consistency with which that has been the case. The number of years that Mint has been that beginner, and you know, it feels a little unfair to say beginner distro, because I'm not a beginner by any stretch of the imagination, yet I run Linux Mint. And I think a lot of that is just getting back to what Blaine said earlier, where it's like, yes, I could run something like Arch or something else where it required a lot of input and decision making on my part, but there's a certain level of like the comfortable shoe or something that Linux Mint is, where yes, there's some change, yes, there's some improvement in small quality of life things, like making it so I could disable the touchpad when I have a mouse plugged in. Really simple things, but things that really matter to me, and it just makes life so much easier sitting
Well,
down and just getting started using the computer.
what I found is that a distro that, you know, requires that higher level of maintenance or work or tweaking to get it to, you know, usability and maintainability, if you're doing all that, it just ends up way too much like what I do at work. And
Yeah,
You know,
I
and
don't
I think
want
about
to be at work.
that naming convention we have where we call some distros beginners distros. It really, that the only purpose that really serves is for the people that are looking for something new that they haven't tried before, you know, and because from where I'm sitting, there's really no such thing as a distro that is only for beginners, you know, meaning that you cannot advance yourself using that distro. You can't do advanced level things with it, because you definitely can do that with Zorin. You can do that with Elementary. You can do it with Mint. You know, anything you can do on this distro over here, theoretically, you could do on any distro. You know, so that thing with the beginner's distro, I really sometimes I worry that might put somebody off. But then again, it's just one of those things we've just gotten used to saying, I think.
But there are some distros that are easier for starting out.
Yeah, easier onboarding. Yeah.
Yeah, and I contend that Cinnamon in general, so apart from Mint, the desktop environment, you know, and you look at, I would consider, you know, obviously GNOME and Plasma as the two major ones, and then you have lots of sort of offshoots with Budgie and stuff like that, or XFC, and XFC is its own thing, obviously, and if that is probably the most stable and sort of unchanging one, so maybe it's not the worst thing to suggest, but Cinnamon seems to always hit that middle ground where there's just enough configurability and just enough sort of creature comforts, and it's familiar enough. It looks like, you know, so you actually touched on this, and I thought that was a really smart thing to talk about, where people can complain and say, well, you know, why does everything look like Windows whenever you're trying to get away from Windows, and this concept of, well, it's just a paradigm, it's just something we're used to. So what made you think to touch on that specifically?
Yeah, I think it something that I realized, and I think it's probably something that's come with, as I've gotten older. I think when I was younger and jumping between platforms all the time, like in any given day, I would be over on Mac for a few hours of the day. I would be on Windows, in all of its various iterations. And then I'd be in Linux, and I'd be like doing all kinds of wild stuff with the interface, and experimenting with different what can a desktop be kind of thing. And and Linux was kind of doing that as well. Plasma activities, or the GNOME 3 overhaul, and making things more touch friendly on one angle, but also very keyboard driven in others. And so there was a lot of experimentation just going on generally. But I think what I found over time was that it was just getting exhausting for the muscle memory of, like, you get used to a certain set of keyboard shortcuts, you get used to things being in a certain place, and at a certain point you just kind of want to get on and get work done. And when you get in the zone of, like, I'm doing work that I need to do, the last thing you want is going, oh yeah, that's right, the window controls are on the other side, or oh yeah, that's right, I don't have a minimize button. Oh yeah, where are my workspaces? Right, okay. And so it was just that muscle memory was something that I noticed myself not having an issue with on Mint. And so I'd be able to come home, open up Mint, do whatever I needed to do, get some stuff done, play some games, whatever, and not even think twice about what the system was doing or what desktop I was on. It was just very seamless. And but then at the same time, I recognized that if there was ever anything that bugged me about, we're back. If there was anything that ever bugged me about the interface, or if there was something that I wanted to move or change or whatever, there was enough control there where I could dial it in specifically without it, sending the rest of the desktop into chaos. So again, yeah, like you mentioned, it's a really, really well dialed in balance between something that's simple and accessible, as well as something that is configurable and is customizable. You can muck around with it, but the base that they give you to start off with is something that feels very comfortable and feels very familiar, and just not having to think about it is a really nice complement for using an OS, I think.
I have to imagine that Clem and the team put a lot of stock in that and are very careful not to make huge changes between releases. And if I get the chance to speak to him someday, hopefully, that is one of the questions I want to ask, is like, how do you plan out any given release? And I love how they're approaching Wayland, where it's like, yeah, we recognize that this is a thing. We're not
Clem is on the
like
Discord. Ask
no,
him.
I know he is, but I would love to just have a conversation with him.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so yeah, just the idea that they're aware of it, they know that it's there and that it's something they have to deal with eventually, and they're going to just take their time and do it over a few years. Like I love the fact that they have enough confidence in themselves and their user base that is an acceptable path.
Yeah, I think Ubuntu used their user base as guinea pigs to make Wayland work better. And Clem isn't willing to do that. I think he wants to work things in until it works right.
No,
I thought going to release it half done.
I thought he mentioned that sometime within the next 2 releases that they were having a drive towards X Wayland.
Yeah, next couple of releases, and their plan, if I remember correctly, is to have moved over by 2026, which is obviously a reasonable time away, actually. Just moving on a little bit, just to on the broader kind of tech landscape. You've been involved now with Linux and technology for over a decade. What are the biggest changes do you think you've seen in that period?
Oh man, there's obviously so much that could be said here. I think obviously the fundamental shift when I think about how I use technology on a daily basis today compared to what I did when I started the channel, I think so much more of what we use on a daily basis is cloud based. So much more of what we do on a daily basis is mobile. based, or like, smartphones and that sort of thing. To the point where, I think the amount of time that I used to spend setting up an OS with all of the locally installed apps and services, there used to be a lot more of that back in the day versus now. So much of the work that we all do, and a lot of the services that we access, you could get well, I can't speak for everyone, but it definitely feels like you could get 80% of your work done just in a web browser. And I think that's a huge shift, and it's definitely consolidated a lot of power and influence into a handful of very large corporations. And I think that's sort of I don't have a particular sort of, I don't know, a social political reason for using Linux. I'm not a huge proponent of the government's watching everything you do and that privacy issues, although I recognize that it's a legit real issue that our society has to reckon with. I think like that wasn't the reason I got into Linux, and so it was just kind of a nice to have as opposed to a fundamental reason to use Linux. But I do think that whole privacy and what are these companies doing with your data, I think is something that I've become more aware of as time has gone on, and I think that's been a huge shift in the tech landscape with how our economies depend on the data that comes from these companies to provide targeted advertisement and that kind of thing. There's just so much money that's been made in using that model over the last 13 years with the rise of the rise of social media across mobile and the web. So I think like those things as a whole have had a far greater influence on the world than maybe what technology used to be, which was, it felt like technology was primarily sort of the Steve Jobs bicycle for the mind type deal. When I was first interacting with computers and that kind of thing. Whereas nowadays it definitely feels like, to quote there was that Netflix doco that came out in 2020 about the social dilemma, I think it was called, and it's talking about how the influence that these companies and advertisements and stuff have on society today is very real. And I think that's probably the biggest shift that I've perceived in tech over 13 years. I don't think we've hit the end point of that yet either, but I definitely feel like people are generally speaking more aware of it now, aware of the influence that these, revenue models and advertising streams and targeting specific audiences based on what data you can gather on them. I think there's a bit more awareness around that now. And so maybe that means, maybe that leads to change down the track, but I don't know if that answers the question.
That's interesting, because there are quite a few. Yeah, I mean, once you've been involved in a tech landscape for such a time, you do see so many things. And I think what you got was technology was a niche thing, relatively speaking. Then you had this mass democratization of that technology with the smartphone, a true game changer, as they say. And then what you find after that is that these companies still need to keep making money. It's not about necessarily the bottom line as in revenue, it's about growth. We kind of touched on it slightly as well with YouTube channels growing, and they need to find ways of growing their revenue streams. And like I've heard many people say, if a service is for free, it means you're the product. You're the data that is being used. And there are times when I think that that's going to come up to a certain tipping point where people will start getting a bit uncomfortable with it, but then it doesn't seem to happen. You just hear about something else and then something else, and but we're still all using these platforms. I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody else.
It's sort of like the year of the Linux desktop. It's going to happen someday.
It's inevitable.
Well, speaking of desktops, that's a good actual segue. Actually, one of the discussions that we've been having on the this podcast and related podcasts is about using Linux on tablets. I've used. I'm a big fan of using GNOME 3, for example, on touchscreen devices. Eric has been experimenting in this as well. Is this something that you've ever looked into?
It is something that I've looked into, and I actually have frighteningly little experience with using Linux on a touch device. I think I've always, because of the fact it's usually been the workhorse, it's not usually the one that I'm poking with my fingers. But yeah, like my early impressions were, this was like quite a few years ago, probably around 2016, 2017, that I was using yeah, I had a device that that could run Linux as a touchscreen fairly well. And yeah, and I remember thinking, this is all right, but at the end of the day, the apps and services that I kind of want on a tablet are more geared towards, Android or iOS than they are on Linux. But that was a while ago, so
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd think about it now.
No, in 2016, it was a lot more work to get Linux running on a tablet and have it working well. I mean, kind of took you back to the days where you were actually using mod probe all the time and getting all the drivers working correctly, and then the proper setup for rotation and everything. So yeah, it's a lot
definitely
different now.
I mean, like talking about the year of the Linux desktop, do you think the year of the Linux phone will happen? I don't think it will, unless you count Android as Linux. And I actually personally do count Android as Linux, but I know a lot of people don't.
Yeah, for sure. No, I definitely see there's always merit in just acknowledging the fact that Android and lots of devices run a Linux kernel, and there's something to be said there for how stable and how capable the Linux kernel is. But in terms of a phone that runs sort of an open source software stack on top of a Linux kernel, decoupled from any major tech companies' apps and services, I don't see that becoming a reality anytime soon, if ever, because I think the power of these ecosystems that have been built between Google and Apple, I think, are monumental for most people to try and get, break out of.
I think saying that Android is Linux is like saying Mac is BSD.
It's a foundational technology, but yeah, it's been taken so far. There's so much abstraction on top of that, but devices have become more or less appliances in a lot of ways, and they've transcended technology in the sense that people don't need to understand how they work in the slightest. It's like a television, it's like a refrigerator, it's like a stove. They don't.
Or it's like a car. The other example I heard was a car. I don't know how my car works, but I know how to drive it badly, admittedly, but I can drive it.
Right. And we become so reliant on that technology now for, the apps that we use, banking apps, and, those are things that sort of are foundational. And the idea that, one of the things that holds back an open source phone is the ability to have the platform, the trusted platform that allows those apps to run, and texting and sort of all the other sort of things that goes along with that. And that is sort of an insurmountable hurdle for an open source project, both financially and it's just so I don't see it happening either. But that doesn't mean there isn't room for devices that aren't a smartphone specifically. So, anyway,
and I think there was a window of opportunity there back when there were other players that were experimenting in the smartphone space. I know Firefox for a little while there was thinking about doing I think they had a mobile project.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
at. And
Amazon had their Fire phone.
Yeah, Amazon had the Fire phone. I think even Facebook tried something at one point. And I think what was compelling about that was that I think the theory behind it was that if you could use just web apps, right? So if you just direct everyone to websites, web services that run through a browser and just render appropriately for the mobile device, then surely that eliminates the need for a whole new app ecosystem. And I think that idea still has merit. I don't know whether that will ever be picked up in any great detail. I know there are bits of that have emerged in iOS and Android as time has gone on, where apps
Chromebooks.
become, Chromebooks, exactly. And Chromebooks seem to have succeeded, to a degree with that kind of idea. Because
Which
as
are also
people just
Linux
get,
and not Linux.
yeah, correct. As people get more, like you say, treating technology like an appliance, provided that the web works in a predictable kind of standardized way, and these apps can, work or function properly on in a mobile web browser, in a mobile environment, then potentially maybe that could work. But like you say, there is a lot of security concerns, and there's other things that have prevented that from happening.
So, actually, just out of interest, what phone do you have? Do you run Android or?
Yeah, so for the longest time, I was, strictly an Android user. But having said that, there's been 2 iPhones that I've owned over the scope of, my adult life, and that's my second iPhone is what I'm on currently. So the barrier to entry for me was always that the pricing of iPhones just seemed bananas, and still is. And so the only way that I got around that was, when Apple released the 2016 iPhone SE, that to me at the time, when it was, I found one that was on sale or through a deal, I think, and I was like, that actually represents decent value, and I like the smaller phone form factor. So I used that for a while. There were still things about iOS that really frustrated me, and so I ditched that and moved back to Android after that phone. And then I came back around with. I think in 2021 with just the fact that a lot of the annoyances with iOS had changed. There was a little bit more customization, a bit more flexibility there. And then, again, find a good deal on a phone, and the longevity of iPhones is definitely something that I appreciate. I was just slowing down in how much and how aggressively I was updating my tech all the time. And, found that iPhones could, they'd get software updates for a long, long time. And so, I've had the same phone now for, 2 and a bit years, and I'll probably keep it for another year and a half. Maybe we'll see how the battery's doing.
How
Yeah,
well
that's
does iOS work with Linux?
Yeah, not well.
Okay.
I mean, like I haven't sort of looked into it too much. The local send wireless transfer app is probably the closest I get to like integrating with my other devices. But then I find that most of the stuff that I'm using on the phone is just a cloud service anyway. Or I think I've gotten a lot of benefit from using not Apple services at all, but my own equivalent of those services. So stuff that's like self-hosted, or like your Nextcloud type stuff, or that kind of thing, and that kind of integrates really well. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I always try to be platform agnostic. I mean, I've only ever had Android. I mean, I say this, but in the early days, I did look into Windows Phone and BlackBerry and stuff like that, and therefore I always consciously wanted to use stuff which was, platform agnostic. Whether it was Dropbox or Google Drive or Mega or whatever, cloud service, whatever. And now it's got to the stage where I mean, I've talked about it in previous episodes. I did have a bit of an experiment with iOS. It didn't go well, but at least I was able to do that because, I wasn't starting off completely blank. I could still access my documents and things like that. Well, we've taken a lot of your time, so I'll just finish off with something. Do you think creating content is something that you're going to continue doing, and it was something you'll always be interested in? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think over time, I think I will continue to ebb and flow with the demands of my job and family and that kind of thing. But I think there's always an interest there for the for making technology more accessible or more approachable for people. And and I think the world of desktop Linux is still very compelling for a lot of people, and it's still very gratifying for me to to see comments on videos and to go through that kind of social interaction process where I make a video and then people discuss it and share their thoughts and their experiences about how they've found particular projects or what they find to be good about different things, or the things that they're enjoying. So I enjoy the social element of discussing these things online, and so I think there's always going to be a bit of an itch to scratch in that area. It just is a matter of like, how much time do I have to give to it, and and where's my interest at the time. So so right now I'm enjoying myself, and we'll just keep cranking out videos for as long as it's interesting for me and or the audience, I guess.
Plug your channel, Blaine.
Yeah. So you can find me on YouTube at Infinitely Galactic. I think the tagline of the channel is showcasing alternatives. So that's kind of that's the idea of the channel. So while a lot of that stuff does end up centering around Linux, I'm trying to also, give a bit of space for other free and open source apps that people can run on not just Linux, but usually it needs to include Linux in order to be on that list. I think I'm in Galactic on Twitter, and that's about it in terms of where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, I do also want to mention that if you ever feel like getting up at 5:30 in the morning on a Saturday, you're always welcome on the Saturday shows. If you want to be a regular host, we will gladly have you on, but it is rather early in the morning for you.
And it is a lot of
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It takes a lot of commitment to do this show.
Well, thanks a lot, Blaine. Thanks a lot for your time, man. Great to see you. Thanks for the engagement. I've been watching your videos since when I first started in Linux over a decade ago as well. So you've been part of my journey. I hope that doesn't sound too creepy, but
not at all. No, I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Blaine. Glad to have you here.
No problem.
Thanks a lot, man. Cheers.
Okay, so you can just
I'll stop my recording.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to stick around, you can. If you want to go take a nap, you can do that too. But
No, I gotta push on. It's Monday morning. I gotta get ready to head out.
Did Bill tell you we send our recordings in as FLAC?
Right, I will do that.
Okay.
And
highest possible quality.
I don't remember if I told you or not. I emailed a link to. It's just a file drop link to the Nextcloud that we use.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it's Monday morning over there, isn't it? Yeah, it's the start of the working week.
That's right. So no, I'm a high school teacher in my day job. So
I'm a sub at the high school around here.
I was going to comment back when we were talking about people using technology as appliances, and my general experience has just been that over the years, like watching the way that teenagers interact with technology, is that there was a time where there were genuine sort of nerds who understood the technology at like the full stack kind of thing, and whereas nowadays most kids know how to entertain themselves using technology, very few of them understand anything about how it actually works. And so there's
an odd
like
regression, right?
Sorry,
like, it's an odd regression. The fact that you'd think they'd become more technical, and yet here we've become less technical.
I was just wondering, I think who's this odd regression person? Yeah.
I think it's a symptom of just the fact that like technology became so accessible and so user friendly that we kind of deleted the need to like learn things. Because
I don't know.
like
I've always had this problem that I need to know how things work, so I could.
But you're strange, you're quite strange. You're quite strange, though, aren't you?
I am. I could actually give you an explanation on how your engine works if you really want, Majid.
Yeah,
but
that sounds fascinating.
Because I mean, I've seen it in whenever I've been to India to visit relatives and stuff like that. There's people who can barely read or write, but they know how to use their mobile phones and make a TikTok and stuff like that.
Let him go take care of his Monday morning.
Yeah.
It was really good talking to you. We'd love to talk to you more. Come on one of the Saturday shows when you don't have anything to do, because it'll be your Sunday morning.
Yeah, every other Saturday we actually have a public show where everyone comes on that wants to.
Yeah, the Saturday's opposite of the regular show. We do a roundtable, and it's just on Discord. So anybody's
cool.
So
Okay.
thanks
Thank
for
you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for
Thanks a lot,
having me
mate.
on.
All right.
Thanks a lot, mate.
All right.
Thanks,
See you
Blake.
later. Bye.
bye now.
Bye.
All right, before we kick off the start of the show, I need to use the restroom, so give me a second.
That was fantastic, guys.
That was great.
Yes.
I had like 5 more questions I could have
Oh,
fired,
yeah.
and then probably thought
yeah.
of 10 more.
That was
But
a
we
solid
also
hour
don't want
interview,
to be the
though.
show that keeps a guy on
Yeah.
against his will. You know.
But that went on for a solid hour. And
Yes, it did.
That
Yeah.
was good. It was
it
very
was-
good. Without very much, there's very, very little that you would ever touch in there. It's just going to be a solid block of time. There were a couple of flubs where we talked over each other. Maybe that, there's opportunity to
Yeah.
pick
There's
one of us or
a
something.
couple of times when I didn't realize I was muted.
Actually, I thought we did better than usual. We frequently talk over each other.
Well, there's something to be said when you've got a guest that is good at being in front of the camera as well.
Let him talk.
Because they just let them take it, and I was quite sure that it was going to go really well just because of that. And then Herrick and Majid just you guys are the grand masters of this one right here for sure, because I just sat back and did nothing the whole time. Every question I had was either asked by one of them or was incorporated somehow in the answer.
But he was a great guest, and I think when he said at the end that he was a high school teacher, I was like, yeah, you know what, that works, because he was very erudite, he was very eloquent in some of the things that he said and the way that he said them.
Yeah,
He had the ability to break things down simply and explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not like your usual tech tuber, if you know what I mean, who's more used to machines than people, probably.
That, and they've always got something they need to plug because there's people paying him money to say certain things about stuff like that. I don't know that we'll ever have somebody like that on the show, but
Okay, guys, let's start the music and get the show going.
Run
Run it, Majid.
Okay, here we go.
Wait, do we need another time sync? I know we have been doing those mid.
Okay,
I have to. You're going to have to see a screenshot of the waveforms one of these days. I'm going to share it because I have to chop these things up from start to finish every single time, just because of Audacity and its weirdness. So it doesn't make any difference.
You have problems with Audacity, do you?
Yeah, Audacity. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Zeros?
Then. So, do you want the zeros or should I just start? What do you want me to do?
Just start
okay.
because I'm just gonna line it up with the YouTube stream anyway. So.
Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 425. This is episode 425.5, recorded on Sunday, November 12th, 2023.
Trying out something new. I'm Joe.
I'm just Moss.
I have been, then Bill.
Banging my head, I'm Majid.
Holy long show notes to get to the top. This is Eric.
So first up in the news, Ubuntu 24.04 gets a name. Mozilla doubles down on Firefox deb package. Discord is now official on FlatHub. Scrappy gets an update. LXQT 1.4.0 is released. Firefox accounts gets a Mozilla rename. Brave launches an AI. There's a new Audacity. OpenELA forms to preserve rel access. Element gets a new license. Proton has a new app. Fedora 39 is released. And OBS Studio 30 is out. In security and privacy, to be completely honest, we've got nothing. But we've got more than enough other interesting stuff to talk about. Then in our wanderings, Bill likes to get things linked up. Joe plays with Nextcloud. Moss shuffles his files around. I play musical chairs. And Eric finally buys a tablet. In our Init sections, we have a wonderful interview with Blaine, the YouTuber, also known as Infinity Galactic. And finally, there'll be some feedback and a couple of suggestions. So, on with the news. Take it away, Joe.
Ubuntu 24.04 gets a name. The next LTS version of Ubuntu is 24.04. Due for release April 25th next year, it has been given the codename Noble Numbat, a small marsupial anteater native to Australia. Daily builds are now available if you want an early peek at what's coming up. It is expected to come with a new Linux kernel, either 6.7 or 6.8 based on timing, and GNOME 46, due out in March. I can't see it because Moss is typing right there.
It is indeed March.
I mean, GNOME 45 only just come out. Seems a bit soon to be putting 46 into an LTS, but okay.
It does, but maybe there is a certain cadence within GNOME itself where they recognize that this is going to be an LTS. I'm not sure. It's a fair point. I would like to see the proposed changes, because maybe it's going to be very minor and very sort of like bug fixish. And
right, they did change their numbering scheme right before, a few releases back. So
right.
What was it? What would it be, like 3 point something 46 or something like that?
Yeah. But that's a fair point. I would have to believe that they'll have a code freeze early enough that it'll give the Ubuntu team time to do testing and integration, and ultimately, I think even with an LTS, that there's going to be that first big bug fix release, like the 0.1 release. So maybe they're just more confident now that they think they'll be able to handle it, and it doesn't need to be sort of slower than it used to be. I don't know. Guess we'll wait and see.
Okay, Mozilla doubles down on Firefox deb package. This is from the Mozilla blog and also 9to5 Linux. We got it from Londoner. At present, Mint users can get Firefox from the Mint repos, which are updated within a day or two after the latest version is released by Mozilla. If you're using Ubuntu or one of its flavors, then you're stuck with the Snap version. If, however, you want to get Firefox directly from Mozilla, currently your only option is to download and install from a tar.bz2 file. This is about to change. The nightly builds are now available as a deb package by switching to Mozilla's own apt repository. Adopting Mozilla's Firefox nightly.deb package offers multiple benefits. You will get better performance thanks to their advanced compiler-based optimizations. You'll get hardened binaries with all security flags enabled during compilation. You will get the latest updates as fast as possible because the package is incorporated into the Firefox release process, and you will not have to create your own .desktop file. Following a period of testing, these packages will become available on the beta, ESR, and release branches of Firefox. Information on how to use the Mozilla apt repository are given in the Mozilla blog post linked in the show notes.
Anybody else think this is strange in a world where we're being pushed so hard off onto these universal packaging formats that this is kind of going back to the old ways of doing things? And not only
it did
that,
seem
but
a bit odd.
Not really.
I'm first off, I agree with this. I am very happy about it because it also means that other distros that are putting a lot of computing resources into creating the binary for themselves for their distribution will no longer have to do that unless they want to. But this seems like something that should have existed a way long time ago. But it just kind of seemed odd at this time for me because there's been so many voices out there trying to get everybody onto Snaps, everybody onto Flatpak and that, but yet all of these little paper cut problems with confinement and stuff like that exist, especially with browsers, So I'm happy to see this. It just kind of struck me as a little odd.
I think there was probably enough pushback on distributions like Ubuntu, who decided that they want to distribute this as a snap versus a native package. And, some of the disgruntled noise that they've heard from users because of decisions like that, I think they basically just sort of said, we want to provide a first-class experience for people, using Debian, using Ubuntu or Debian derivatives. It's a little, I guess, bit of favoritism that it's not RPM or other package formats, but I guess you can't sort of please everybody. But that would be my guess, is that there's just been enough of an issue with people. I mean, I know the first thing I do whenever I start using Ubuntu is get rid of all the snaps and start using either a Flatpak version of Firefox, which is usually good enough, or just the tar.gz file that you could get and, sort of run it that way. And this is nice because it saves you the trouble of having to do the integration yourself. But yeah, that would be my guess. I think as a software developer, they want to have greater control over releasing something that they can sanction, can support, and ultimately provide an update path moving forward for.
Yeah, because anecdotally, one problem that I've heard people mention ever since the whole Snap thing was that because of the confinement, you had difficulty connecting the browser to certain remote storage solutions like SMB or things like that, just because of the confinement. So it was, for a long time there, it just kind of seemed like, well, are they going to find a solution to this problem, or is it going to be something bolted on? And then, people like that, their solution was to use the tarball and then install it, which is a perfectly usable option, but it requires you to do your own adding of the .desktop file and things like that. So this is good news. I think this is the kind of thing we want Mozilla doing is listening to the community and offering solutions that actually work. If nobody has anything else, we'll move on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Discord is now verified on FlatHub from OMG Ubuntu. Discord, the phenomenally popular proprietary chat platform, is now verified on FlatHub. For years, a Discord Flatpak app has been available on FlatHub, albeit without any official association approval or contribution from Discord itself. However, that's fully changed. Being verified on FlatHub means an app is published by its original developer or third party approved by the developer, according to FlatHub documentation. Verified apps show a checkmark on the FlatHub store page to let users know the software in question is legit. This means users who install Discord from FlatHub on Linux can be certain that the Discord app they are installing is legitimate and safe. Linux users can also get Discord from Canonical Snap Store. However, it's important to note that the Discord application in the Snap Store is maintained by the Snapcrafters community and is not officially endorsed or maintained by Discord. And for my part, I can tell you that it is still running an outdated version of Electron because I still get the green flashing when I try to use it. So I just use a web app built with Chromium, and that works just fine with my camera. So I don't know what changes have been made. It seems to behave exactly the same as it did before, but you do have desktop integration and proper notifications and all that.
That's not a bug. It's a feature.
Yeah. I was a little disappointed to see that, but Eric.
I think anytime you have a developer that's willing to adopt or let's say have responsibility for releasing something on a platform, it legitimizes it all that much more. And I think we've seen, it didn't surprise me a bit, and not to give anything away, but we talked to Blaine and he was saying that he likes Flatpak. And I mean, I have yet to hear many people just flat out straight face tell me that they use Snap. And I think so that there's sort of this, most people that at least I'm aware of are using Flatpak. Most distributions are starting to centralize their non-essential core apps on like GNOME's using Flatpak for, releasing their applications, their calendar and weather and sort of all that stuff. And it's the legitimization of Flatpak as a real way to distribute your software. Each individual developer that comes on board and takes responsibility for publishing their application. And the other thing that I think is important is that it's not an open source application. And we may want to use open source more than closed source, but the reality is that there are still those sort of important applications that most people use, and Discord is definitely one of them. And so you have a non-open source developer providing a verified package on this way to distribute software. This is all good stuff.
I wanted to point out that even all of the more recent flavors of Ubuntu started with Flatpak, and it wasn't until they got made official that Ubuntu cracked the whip and said, no, you're using Snap now.
Well, something to point out here, and something that Leo kind of touched on in the YouTube chat, is that most people don't even know that they're using snaps when they're using Ubuntu. They're not really looking into it. So the people that you're talking to that are using Flatpaks are the people that are actually looking into things and actively choosing to use something which is Flatpak. So there's a lot of people that are using Snap. They're just not talking about it because they don't care what they use. They're just using it.
Fair point.
I think that's probably spot on, actually.
But I still contend that my point about other distributions, if there are other distributions using Snap, there aren't very many of them. And I think there's probably a reason for that, because again, Ubuntu sort of centralized, or Canonical centralized the Snap server side of things. We've heard from people who were prolific Snap contributors who sort of got burned out on that and are no longer maintaining their Snap packages, so that you have this sort of cruft and stuff being out of date. I'm not knocking on it. I think it still is a good strategy for Canonical to have a way to publish essential packages across multiple versions of Ubuntu. So that strategy makes sense. I still just don't see it as being as mainstream or as sort of present as Flatpak is in the entire sort of spectrum of Linux in general.
Okay, moving on. Screen Copy version 2.2. This is from the Screen Copy GitHub. This is one of the utilities that I do enjoy. Just got released. The changes since version 2.1.1 is add the option to mirror the camera, add pause on exit. They renamed display to display ID. It fixes the device connection detection with no video function. It accepts turn screen off without video playback. It's upgraded the SDL to 2.28.4 on the Windows releases. It upgraded the platform tools, the ADB tools, to 34.0.5 in Windows releases, and also had various other technical fixes. And I will say I do still use this app on occasion with ADB wireless, so that way I don't have to keep my phone hooked to my computer in order for it to work. They just need to be on the same wireless network, and then I can just control my phone from my computer. And I know I'm probably the only person on here that uses that, so I don't expect a whole lot of conversation in that regard.
I've tried it, and I think it works well. I just don't have a real use case for needing it. I mean, I don't even use like GS Connect, or my phone's right next to me all the time anyway. So it just kind of feels like duplication of effort to have notifications bouncing everywhere. And as far as file copies and stuff, I've been using Local Send, which I know a couple of you just recently discovered. But yeah, I've sort of got the use cases of something like this covered. But it is very interesting. And I'm more interested in actually running Android applications natively with something like Waydroid or something like that. But I haven't gotten around to trying that. Is that something you've used, Joe,
I've tried several of the different, things, and maybe the technology has improved since I've done it. But like Anbox, I think Bluetio was one or something. And I've never found ones that, consistently works. Like I found ones that loaded up, but then wouldn't load specific applications or wouldn't load the applications that I used, or just didn't load them up well.
I know what you're saying, Eric, about, if my phone's already there and it's getting all the notifications and all that sort of stuff. I do find that it is something that if you get used to, having, your messages come up while on your screen, while on your computer screen while you're doing some work or whatever, it does improve your productivity a little bit, because there's less of the looking, okay, then mentally triaging it in your mind that it's a waste of time, and then, then moving forward. And also, I find that, especially when it comes to things like links, like somebody might send me a link on WhatsApp or something, but I actually want to see the website properly on, on a proper monitor and this kind of thing. In fact, that's literally just happened now. Somebody sent me a message about writing to your MPs, similar to your congressman, I suppose, about certain issues or whatever. And I was wanting to open it up on my the screen now, and I was like, okay, hold on, I need to kind of copy it here, put it there, and then do this, and then do that. It would be so much nicer if it was more seamless. So I maybe it's just one of these things that once you get used to, you kind of want, but if you've never got used to it, you don't see the point of.
Well, I use KDE Connect to get my notifications onto my computer screen. But if I want to control my phone so I don't have to pull out my phone, I also have stands that, keep my phone nearby or whatever. But if I want to control my phone without taking my hand off my mouse because I'm doing 10 other things, then I'll have it brought up and it will be all the way on one side of my screen, just taking over a portion of my screen. And I can just roll my mouse over there and click whatever. Okay, slide up, slide right. It's all good. And then I'm moving on to right back to my work without having to pull my phone out and just use that directly.
Yeah, gotcha.
Bill?
LXQT 1.4.0 released. And this is from the LXQT blog. The LXQT team announces the release of LXQT 1.4.0, the lightweight Qt desktop environment. LXQT 1.4.0 is based on Qt 5.15, the latest LTS version of Qt 5. If everything goes as planned, this is the last Qt 5 based release. We'll do our best to port the next release to Qt 6, even if we have to delay it, says the team. LXQT menu data is released to replace LX menu data anywhere needed. In LXQT's file manager and its library, the user can now add the command for the default terminal. The state of split view is considered on restoring tabs of the last window. An SVG icon is added for PCMan FM Qt. Password and anonymity settings of the mount dialog are remembered, and several fixes and enhancements are made to the codecs. Q Terminal supports Audible Bell as an option. Also, PuTTY-style mouse button swap is supported, and Falcon color scheme is added. LXQT's image viewer has a minimal support for color spaces now. Note, there are no new releases of LXQT build tools and LXQT themes because they haven't changed since their last releases. Of course, the former is essential to building LXQT 1.4.0. New versions of other LXQT products are also released, such as PCMan FM. Anybody use LXQT?
I've tried. Ubuntu, a couple times, and that's really about it. I could see it being useful on very sort of like modest hardware. I like the fact that it's modular and you can use different compositors and stuff like that. But yeah, ultimately, I just kind of find that it doesn't suit my workflow. But That's
I just-
really
I tried it on Open Mandriva 4.2 or 3, and they had put it out as a beta, and it was really more of an alpha because about a third of the mouse things weren't working on it. But I did report my bugs in, and I don't see a need for it myself since I'm on Moksha most of the time. But you talk about a light desktop.
quite a bit lighter than LXQT.
Mm-hmm.
And to be
I
fair,
mean,
the difference between, in terms of lightness, the difference between it and then just running a very bare bones plasma installation is just not a whole heck of a lot.
exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. That I have, whenever I've used it, I've not used it often, I'll be honest, but when I have used it, because Lubuntu used to be my go-to for if I've got really old hardware, 32-bit or whatever, and I just need to resurrect it and then pass it on to a kid or something like that. And so I was a little bit, I won't say annoyed, but I was a bit kind of apprehensive as to what the shift to QT when they did the shift about 5-6 years ago would be. And then when I did install it once, I remember thinking to myself, this is just plasma, and that's fine. But then it's like plasma is lighter than it used to be, and it's more performant than it used to be. And the whole point about if you're going to be putting on something like Ubuntu on a machine is that it's not a very good machine. So you're kind of like you're not winning either battle. You're not either making something performant or suitable for low hardware. Do you kind of see what I mean? It's like you're in between two stalls there, and you haven't achieved either.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, there was a concerted effort to reduce the memory footprint of plasma, and we did see that where it got considerably lighter, and just in general, better on lesser hardware. So I think that sort of takes the onus off of some of these specialized desktop environments. I don't know. I know there are certainly people who really enjoy Ubuntu and just appreciate maybe the aesthetic of LXQt, or I don't know. I know that I've tried it. It seems to be all sort of hooked together and working well. And I know the team continues to iterate with each release. I don't have the use case for that. I mean, I would think maybe if I had a lower power device, like take my tablet, for example, um, even though it is pretty high powered in terms of specs, it is an older device that might benefit from a lighter weight desktop environment, except that I wouldn't say that LXQT is a touch friendly interface. So that's not really suiting that need. And then maybe if I then look at an older laptop, I don't know. I don't generally tend to have use cases for those lighter weight.
Yeah, no,
desktop
same here.
environments.
No, same here. I mean, there isn't anything. If you use something like Mate or XFCE, then that is plenty performant in low hardware. You don't need anything even lighter than that. I mean, I know Moss is saying you've got Moksha, which is even lighter, but the point I'm trying to say is that there isn't a significant delta between Lubuntu, Xubuntu, and Ubuntu Mate or Linux Mint Mate edition. They're, especially with the kind of specs that we're at and the kind of diminishing returns that we're getting. Stuff from a couple of years ago is plenty powerful. I remember, I trying to run GNOME 3 on an Intel Atom with 1 gig of RAM. That was a device that you needed something lightweight for. Now even a 5-year-old device is more than fine. So, but choice is good, and that's kind of what FOSS is all about. So Eric, I think it's your turn next.
Yeah, why Firefox accounts are becoming Mozilla accounts. So what's in a name, right? This is from the Mozilla blog. over the past few years, a Firefox account has grown into its support beyond the web browser. It's now the authentication and account management tool for millions of users across Mozilla's family of products. So, to reflect this expanding world of Mozilla services, we've made the decision to rename Firefox accounts to Mozilla accounts. With this name change, we hope people who love Firefox will continue to support the open source browser that kickstarted Mozilla's journey. We also welcome them to explore our growing slate of Mozilla people first products. Want a more transparent online shopping experience? Try FakeSpot. Looking to secure your internet connection? Check out Mozilla VPN. Relay will help protect your phone number and email addresses from spammers, while Monitor can help your sensitive data stay private. And if you hope to find and save the best content online, give Pocket a try. So it makes sense. I mean, there's basically saying having it called Firefox accounts was a little limiting and also wasn't really serving the interest of Mozilla necessarily with all of these other now products that they're providing. So
I'm just surprised it's taken them this long, actually.
Yeah, I don't know if there would be any sort of back end sort of challenges to renaming something. I mean, possibly. I don't know, but yeah, pretty straightforward. So that won't be a surprise for anyone, I guess.
Up next, Brave launches Leo AI. 3 months ago, Brave previewed Leo, the browser-native AI assistant, on its nightly channel for developers and testers. Since then, we've seen great adoption with tens of thousands of users globally. With user feedback, we've been able to improve much faster than we'd hoped on response times, the quality of responses, even the product UI. Today, we're excited to announce that the Brave Leo is ready for all Brave users, available in desktop release 1.60. With that testing, we also received requests for new features. The most common one has been to add different AI language models in Leo. To that end, we're bringing our users advanced conversational AI experiences through Brave Leo Premium, our new paid option featuring Claude Instant Anthropic's state-of-the-art AI assistant. Leo, Brave's browser AI assistant, can help with all sorts of tasks. It can create real-time summaries of web pages or videos. It can answer questions about content or generate new content. It can even translate pages, analyze them, rewrite them, and more. Whether you're looking for information, trying to solve a problem, or creating content, Leo can help. Leo combines this easy, free access to AI with the privacy focus of Brave. Chats with Leo are private, anonymous, and secure. Leo doesn't record chats or use them for model training. And no account or login is required to use Leo. With cutting-edge technology and privacy, Brave Leo pushes the boundaries of typical AI chatbot services. And it sounds like Leo, formerly from mintCast. I added that last part, don't worry.
I was going to make that joke that, Leo Chavez has now become an AI assistant. Maybe he'll become cleverer. Hey,
Well,
he didn't
he's
say
become
that.
Brave Leo. So he's
Whoa.
now not just Leo, he's Brave Leo.
Okay,
And
Well, he does
interesting,
face
Leo is
college
a Brave
kids every
user.
day. Yeah.
can I have a slight mini rant about this?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, you might regret saying that. So I like Brave, right? Brave has been my go-to browser on most of my devices, Android, Linux, even the Windows work machine I've got. It's what my kids use it now as well. Because they're so used for me putting it on that now they put it on their devices as well. And part of it was because it was, privacy focus and security, and it seemed to kind of tick a lot of the FOSS boxes, as it were. But then they do a couple of things that just make you take a little step back and go, what's going on here exactly? So the first one was their crypto token. Then having an actual crypto wallet. Now I'm someone who does stupidly still have some Bitcoin, and I will not accept it's a Ponzi scheme, not yet, honestly. It's to the moon. But even I found that a bit odd. I know it put a couple of people off. Then they made their own VPN, and I'm always slightly suspicious of any browsers making a VPN, because I mean, they say they're not taking our data, but I mean, they're literally, it's all going through literally their servers. So why wouldn't you? And now they've got an AI assistant, which I'm assuming is built on ChatGPT, and Open AI. And it's just, I don't know, there's something that's a little bit unsettling about it. Now, this could just be old man Majid wants the hippies off his lawn. I'm not sure. So I just find it a bit odd. That's all. It's just, I don't know. Maybe, as I said, maybe I'm wrong.
I think that they clamor for relevance in a lot of cases. I mean, Brave tries very hard to both differentiate itself yet support all of the mainstream options in a browser. So they're sort of caught in this middle ground of being somewhat unique, yet still trying to be all things to all people. Vivaldi's kind of in that same space. But I don't know. AI in particular, I don't know if you guys have much experience with it, but I keep testing it just to see like where are we right now. And so as an example of this, and just as my mini rant, is I tested Bard, which is Google's AI, and ChatGPT on a question about a movie. And this movie is Gentlemen Broncos, and it's just a really silly movie that nobody's really heard of. And in it, the protagonist's mother has designed this line of dresses, and they all have these really silly names. And I wanted to know what the names were. And I thought, okay, this is a perfect question for AI, right? They always tout how you could just get that type of information seamlessly from a movie or whatever. And you think a movie is going to have subtitles and voice recognition and other ways for that model to extract that data, right? So what was the truth was Bard decided to invent about 50 different names for things for these dresses that never happened. It wasn't part of the movie. None of the names are correct. They were like the dress that makes you look like a unicorn, the dress that makes you look like an aardvark. I mean, it was absolutely ludicrous and ridiculous and 100% incorrect and false. And if you didn't know that, you might accept it at face value. ChatGPT did the exact opposite. It said there was no protagonist mother naming naming dresses in this movie when yes, there were. It was exactly like it was a point of the movie that this is like, a silly thing that they go through these goofy names and it's the whole movie's ridiculous by nature, but this point is that it was even more ridiculous. And so anyway, so they were both 100% completely wrong in different ways. And how is this helpful in any way? It's not. It just pollutes the conversation. It makes it so that if you believe or try to verify this information, it takes you more time than to just go find the right answer on your own in a search engine. So
I am told that that's pronounced ChatGibbity, which gives me a whole image in my head of a Mary Poppins AI.
Sing it for us, boss.
ChatGibbity, chat.
You know what? That's going to be the title of this episode, isn't it? ChatGibbity with Infinity Galactic.
Yeah, probably.
I'd like to, but I don't.
Anyway, I would like to think that instead of everybody just jamming AI, and for them to say we don't take any user feedback, nothing you do in there matters because it's all anonymous. Like, well, then how is it ever going to improve? How can I tell these developers like what you're giving me is garbage? At least in those other systems, I can do that. So anyway, I'm so over the AI in everything phase of existence, and I hope that it just dries up soon. Although
So
I'm sure
you get
it's
these
not,
fads,
so.
yeah. You get these fads, don't you? I mean, from my perspective, it's like we were kind of mentioning earlier that smartphones came and they this great democratization of technology, and it was a real disruptor, and companies are just looking for that next big thing. And some people thought it was wearables, with Android smartwatches and Apple watches and stuff like that, and then other people thought it was about the cloud, and you had different kind of cloud services, and other companies thought it was VR. and you had Google Cardboard, and now you've got Meta Quest and all this kind of stuff. And this just sounds like one of those things which is a solution in search of a problem. That is not to say that AI doesn't have its uses. Like everything in life, everything has its uses. I use my smartwatch when I'm at the gym so that I can time my workouts, for example. I know that people use virtual reality to help with problem children in the hospital, to kind of calm them down. So I'm sure this has its uses. I've heard about coders saying that they find it really useful and all that kind of stuff. But it does seem like this is us bigging something up so that people will jump onto the bandwagon. And because this bandwagon's happening, everybody wants to be on it. And you have these VCs and what you call hedge fund managers who are looking, they're so terrified they're going to miss the next Amazon or Google or whatever. It's just a little bit, yeah.
AI is the worst it will ever be right now. It's only going to get better.
That's true.
Or worse, could get scary.
Well, it's only going to get smarter.
I'll tell you what was funny. Do you remember a couple of years ago when Microsoft came up with something and it turned into this kind of chatbot and it turned into some kind of racist on Twitter?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was hilarious. I thought because but basically, don't learn about human beings from Twitter. It will turn you into a racist fascist.
Pretty much. Well, all right. I guess enough said on that. Bill?
Audacity 3.4 released with new music workflows and a time stretch tool. This is from OMG Ubuntu.
This is ironic. You're talking about Audacity.
Oh, I chose this article for reasons.
Do you have problems with Audacity, Bill?
One or two, yeah. You might. I might have mentioned it before.
Really? I can't remember.
Article first, pick on them after.
A brand new version of Audacity, the open source audio workstation, has been released. Audacity 3.4 includes a number of new features and improvement, including new music workflows that will greatly enhance the editor's appeal with musicians. One of the biggest new features in Audacity 3.4 is a new beat and measures grid. This new view makes it easier to align clips to a project's tempo and rhythm, with options to show subdivisions and snap clips to the nearest beat. Also included is a new time stretch tool. This makes it a breeze to change the duration of an audio clip without affecting the pitch, which most traditional time stretch tools do. It does this by using a new algorithm specifically made for music, which the project says outperforms commercial options. Finally, there's a new exporter view that groups together all options into a single window. No need to pop up different dialogues to adjust things first. Audacity say the exporter now features the native file browser, giving you access to all your bookmarked folders. Now, what's essentially happening here, as far as I'm concerned, is Audacity is sort of evolving into a proper DAW, DAW, digital audio workstation, and it will be comparable, or more comparable, that is, to tools like Ardour or Reaper, or even on the Windows side, stuff like Ableton. They're really cranking up the number of features and options that you have in that particular piece of software, and eventually we're going to get a new user interface that is going to make it look modern, and it'll work better with Wayland. And for the time being, however, I can say that I actually have 3.4.1, and there is still no horizontal scroll bar until you jump through the hoops of unmaximizing and then remaximizing. I have just basically learned to use Audacity without that scroll bar. I've just I forced myself to do that, and honestly, the way I do my editing, it turned out to be kind of a non-issue anyway. However, there is also the ongoing problem, and I've actually filed a bug for this, with time decay in recordings, where I end up having to split the clips in several different places in order to keep it in line. And it's not a gradual thing. It's not a steady thing. It will decay in both directions at different rates throughout the length of the recording. And the longer the recording, the more of these things you would see. It seems to coincide with when somebody is doing a lot of talking for a pretty long period of time. For some reason, the recording seems to lose its timing. And it only seems to be an issue on Linux, because there's been a lot of times when Leo, for example, has used Windows or Mac to do Linux OTC, and his timelines are immaculate. Joe's timelines are good. Joe, are you using a repo installed version of Audacity?
Yes.
Okay. So that was my next theory. I haven't really tested it. It just seems like the people running the old version is a little bit better, unless they're running a distribution that's taking full advantage of Pipewire. So I don't know. I've yet to get to the bottom of the problem, but it's not been enough of a problem to steer me away. I've actually kind of made my peace with Audacity because, it is what it is, and it does a good job at the things that it says. So for anybody that thought I had Audacity hate, I certainly don't. It's just one of those darling open source projects that we really want to be good, and when you're running the updated version, sometimes you're going to run into paper clips,
I honestly think, and a lot of people were pretty upset by the whole telemetry thing, that the MuseScore brought in, but I honestly think in the long run, having a company supporting this amount of technical debt in particular. So Audacity is a fabulous for what it is, but it's not a DAW currently. They've added real-time effects, which sort of gets you there a little bit, but they're still, the UI is really probably the greatest limiting factor right now in terms of multiple tracks and being able to manage sort of all the effects on different things. And it's so close. Like, I think the back end of it, the engine is really good, and there's a lot of like very strong components to it, but there's this technical debt of the UI toolkit that they chose, and the sort of bridging into MuseScore's different products and trying to incorporate that. But I do feel that within a few years, you're probably going to see a completely reinvented Audacity that does a lot of things that it kind of sort of does now, but it does them with aplomb and does like becomes one of those darling projects, I think.
Yeah.
Even more so than it is now.
Okay, then moving on. CIQ, Oracle, and SUSE unite behind OpenELA to take on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So this is from ZDNet.
Yeah, fight the power.
When Mike McGrath, Red Hat Core Platforms Vice President, announced that Red Hat was putting new restrictions on who could access Red Hat Enterprise Linux's code, other Linux companies that depended on their code for their own distro releases were, in a word, unhappy. Eric, I'll have to point out that I am the socialist around here. All right. 3 of them, CIQ, Oracle, and SUSE, came together to form the Open Enterprise Linux Association, or OpenELA. Not a cover band of the Beatles. Their united goal was to foster the development of distributions compatible with RHEL by providing open and free enterprise Linux source code. Now the first code release is available. As Thomas Di Giacomo, SUSE's Chief Technology and Product Officer, said in a statement, We are pleased to deliver on our promise of making source code available and to continue our work together to provide choice to our customers, while we ensure that Enterprise Linux source code remains freely accessible to the public. Why are they doing this? Well, Gregory Kurtzer, CIQ's CEO and Rocky Linux's founder, says organizations worldwide standardized on CentOS because it was freely available, followed the Enterprise Linux standard, and was well supported. After CentOS was discontinued, it left not only a gaping hole in the ecosystem, but also clearly showed how the community needs to come together and do better. OpenELA is exactly that, the community's answer to ensuring a collaborative and stable future for all professional IT departments and enterprise use cases. Okay, everybody, fight!
I think this is a fabulous demonstration of how the indignation of open source, where they're just like, "Oh, you want to put it behind a paywall? Well, we'll see about that." You know, it is. I both love and despise that attitude, because in one way it is so endearing, and it's you're always the fighting, rooting for the little guy, like, who's fighting against the big evil corporation.
Except the little guy is a big evil corporation as well. Right. Oh, in this case, at least two of them.
Right.
Well,
right,
I would
right.
point
So,
out that they should have mentioned earlier in the article about CIQ being the parent company for Rocky Linux.
yeah, I know. But the other hand, it is, I think these types of things cause a lot of fragmentation, and at the end of the day, I think it's probably not in the spirit of the licensing, and I think Red Hat has maybe taken a bad step here, but it's their business model. They're wildly successful. I don't see the customers that use Red Hat and pay for it. I don't think they could care less about any of this. This has zero impact on any of them. So to Red Hat's bottom line, this has a very small, if any, negligible impact. The only thing you could say is that, well, there may have been shops that would have started on one of the open versions and then realized they wanted the support of Red Hat. So there was this sort of, and this could be mythical for all I know, that there was this sort of conversion of someone who was using CentOS or Rocky or one of these other bit for bit, remakes.
Well, when you start out as a small shop, a small shop doing business with big companies, and then you grow and you grow and you grow. You start out with CentOS, which doesn't, really provide any help from Red Hat, and then as you grow beyond that, and you do need that help, that support, then you pay for it, which was always their model in the past, and now it's not.
Well, but SUSE Enterprise Linux has their own business model, and they basically are in this only to because some of their customers also run Red Hat, and they want to be able to interface their machines. But SUSE is still the second most successful Linux enterprise out there.
Yeah. Which I think, in a way, kind of makes it even a little bit stranger that they are behind this, or have a significant stake in it. To what end? I guess it would be my question. But
well, as I said, their machines have to talk to other people's machines that are not running it.
Yeah, I guess.
They don't want to be cut out of the loop in some business situation where they're already running RHEL.
Yeah, maybe that's sort of struggle for recognition and relevance. I don't know.
Okay.
So what do you say, Moss?
I say we've got another article to read.
Go ahead, Moss.
I choked myself there. A new home and license, AGPL for Synapse and Friends, from the Element blog. After considerable thought and taking particular inspiration from Grafana, the folks at Element have chosen to pursue future development of Synapse, the main matrix server, Dendrite, our second-generation matrix server, and associated server-side projects such as Sident and Signal, under the terms of the Affero General Public License AGPL-v3, maintaining the code in new repositories in the Element GitHub org, forked from the Apache licensed repositories in the matrix.org GitHub, originally donated by Element. This is still the same team of developers who have been working on Matrix since it began in 2014, still developing and releasing Synapse as open source, and in fact, arguably even more free and libre than before thanks to the AGPL. Client-side code developed by Element, including projects donated to the Foundation, is not affected. The benefit of switching to AGPL v3 is that it obliges downstream developers to contribute back to the core project, either by releasing their modifications as open source for the benefit of the whole Matrix ecosystem, or by contacting Element for an alternative license. Future code contributors to Synapse will need to sign a Contributors License Agreement, CLA, based on the Apache Software Foundation's CLA, giving Element the right to license the contribution commercially to third-party proprietary forks so we can use it to help fund Matrix core development in the future. Edit, to be clear, the sole reason for a CLA is to allow Element to dual license the software as per their philosophy, not to give Element the ability to relicense a non-OSI license in the future. After all, Element already had that ability with the Apache license and has not used it. This preserves the free and open source nature of these Matrix implementations under an OSI-approved open source license, AGPL v3, while encouraging proprietary forks to contribute to the development costs of the underlying project.
I don't know a huge amount about this. What do you guys think?
I think we can move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Okay, then. I do know a little bit about this one. Proton releases a brand new Linux app with many new features for its Proton VPN service. So this is from Alternative 2. Proton has unveiled a completely redesigned Linux application for its Proton VPN service. The new Proton VPN Linux app, which has been rebuilt from scratch, is efficient, elegant, and modular, allowing for seamless integration of new features as they are developed. The new Linux app introduces a host of new features. Among them is the NetShield ad blocker, a DNS filtering feature designed to block ads, trackers, and malware. Also includes a kill switch that prevents your real IP from being exposed if your VPN connection drops, a VPN accelerator designed to enhance speed, and a moderate NAT which can solve connection issues during multiplayer online gaming or WebRTC video conversations. Ooh, that might come in handy for us. The new Linux app also boosts peer-to-peer performance and can auto-connect at startup. It includes OpenVPN DCO, which provides speed performance equivalent to WireGuard. Another noteworthy feature is Secure Core, a double VPN security solution where the initial server is located only in countries with robust privacy laws. The new Proton VPN Linux app is officially supported on the latest versions of Debian, Ubuntu, and Fedora. So, I investigated Proton. So I think myself and Bill a couple of months ago we talked about different cloud services and things like that. And then one of the things that I looked into was Proton, because Proton seemed to have a suite of apps. It has its email client, it's got its cloud storage, and it has its VPN service. And I have used the free VPN service a couple of times, and it was fine. It was very functional. Let me put it that way. It wasn't. It didn't have any bells and whistles, which maybe you could argue didn't need to. So I'll be interested to check out this new Linux app to see how it works. Funnily, I mean, I know this isn't actually in the news, but funnily, Proton doesn't have a Proton Drive Linux client. It was one of the reasons why I never investigated that more further, is because, you can only use the web interface. So it's nice to see that they do actually give a hoot about Linux.
They do have an Android app for Proton Drive.
Yes, they do. They do indeed.
So it shouldn't be that hard for them to write a Linux app.
No,
I
I'm
created
sure
a Proton email account years ago, and then just never used it because I've already got 5 other email accounts.
Oh,
And
I'm totally bought into Proton.
well, so I created another one because the one I created really wasn't a good sort of Linux version. So I created one specifically for sort of all these podcasts and all that. And yeah, I think the client on Android is pretty good. I think their web client is pretty good. I like that they have storage. I mean, they're starting to expand their services, and I think as they continue to do that and offer private encrypted traffic and sort of all that it is a good value considering what they charge for it. I loved seeing apps brought to Linux. Now, Proton is kind of already sort of open source and Linux focused. So that I think this is more impactful when I see a company that isn't necessarily in that space. So I use a VPN called Windscribe, WINDSCRIBE, and they're out of Canada. Just sort of a funny company, smaller, irreverent, not owned by a marketing firm like all the 99% of other VPNs are in the world. And sort of, I just enjoy the fact that they also have invested pretty heavily in their Linux client. And it's a beautiful GUI app with all of these same features that you just read through. And it just happens to be the one that I use. But any company that is investing in native Linux apps, I think has the foresight to realize, like, the user base is there, and if they can get themselves sort of in the conversation, that they become, they can at least cover the cost of developing it, if not have a decent, return on it. So now that they've released this, I'm definitely more interested to go back and look at Proton's offering and see how close it matches Windscribe, and is it something I kind of like to spread that out sometimes. I don't like the idea that I'm using one VPN for all of my traffic and stuff, because I kind of feel like, well, it's just as bad as an ISP at that point. Maybe I use one for this and one for that, and not to be too confused about it, but I would like to have maybe 2 or 3 that I can kind of cycle through.
Well, we are on a family Visioneer plan that Firecat hosts. That anything that gets rolled out, we get the pro version of it right off the bat. So that's really a added value. That if you get on a all inclusive plan, then it also includes everything else that they're rolling out. They don't just keep tacking on more charges to it.
Got it. Yeah, good for them. Good job, Proton. All right. Well, so my next item is that, and I'm actually using this, so this is a kind of relevance why I picked it, but Fedora 39 is officially here. This is from Fedora Magazine on November 6, 2003. No. Oh, okay. Sorry. I should have read it first. I thought someone typed 2003 instead of 23, but no. On November 6, 2003, the Fedora project released the Fedora Core 1. One day and 20 years later, we're pleased to bring you the Fedora Linux 39 release, our complete community-built operating system for desktops, laptops, servers, the cloud, edge devices, and just about anything else you can think of. As always, you should make sure your system is fully up to date before upgrading from a previous release. Can't wait to get started. Download while you read. Fedora Workstation now features GNOME 45, which brings better performance and many usability enhancements, including a new workspace switcher and a much improved image viewer. If you're looking for a different desktop experience, our Budgie Special Interest Group has created Fedora Onyx, a Budgie-based atomic desktop in the spirit of Fedora Silverblue. Of course, that's not all. We also have updated desktop flavors, including KDE Plasma Desktop, XFCE, Cinnamon, and more. I found it interesting that they use the word flavors here whenever they actually call them spins, but there you go. Fedora Cloud Images will be officially available in Microsoft Azure, in addition to Google Cloud and AWS. Also, our cloud images now are configured so that Cloud Init can, at your option, install updates and reboot when first provisioned, so you know you're running with our latest security updates. As always, we've updated many other packages, as well as we work to bring you the best of everything the free and open source software world has to offer. Fedora Linux 39 includes GCC 13.2, binutils 2.40, glibc 2.38, gdb 13.2, and rpm 4.19. It also has updates to popular programming language stacks, including Python 3.12 and Rust 1.73. A particular note, we include the latest version of Inkscape, the popular vector graphics illustration and drawing tool. Inkscape also turned 20 yesterday. We're digital twins. Congratulations to everyone in that awesome project as well. The reason I wanted to read this story in particular was because I had to pick a GNOME-centric distro to put on the tablet that I just got. And I'm going to speak about that a little bit later in our happenings. But and so I thought, okay, well, what's the closest to vanilla stock GNOME? And that would be Fedora. There's other projects as well, but in terms of sort of the flagship GNOME experience, I would say that Fedora and GNOME are really sort of tightly woven together, especially in obviously their workstation release. So I installed 39 beta, and I've been using that for 2-3 weeks now, and they've now officially released 39. It's not in beta anymore, and seamless update. And yeah, it's been a really great experience. Like, as I had mentioned to Blaine earlier, I know I'm sort of out of order with saying it now, but Fedora has gotten so much better over the last, let's say, 5 releases, in terms of just the way it's put together, the usability of it. I haven't had any like SE Linux problems that I used to have, or RPM issues like I used to. DNF has gotten a lot better recently. And yeah, Fedora has just become a very strong option, particularly if you do any kind of development, cloud ops kind of stuff, DevOps stuff. Like, it's a great sort of out of the box experience.
Yeah, Dale has been talking to Clem quite a bit because the boot system for Fedora and the boot system for Mint don't like talking to each other for some reason. I don't think he's come to a understanding on that yet. He hasn't come to a solution on it yet, but he's still having a conversation with Clem in our Discord that you might want to check in on and follow.
Good point.
Okay, go on, Moss. Last bit of news.
Okay. OBS Studio released with support for Intel QSV, H264, HEVC, and AV1 on Linux. This is from 9to5 Linux. Highlights of OBS Studio 30 include support for Intel QSV, Quick Sync Video, H264, HEVC, and AV1 on Linux, WIP/WebRTC output, HDR playback support for DeckLink output, 10-bit capture support for DeckLink devices, as well as YouTube Live Control Panel when streaming to YouTube. This release also introduces a new safe mode that will let you run the app without third-party plugins, scripting, and WebSockets. The safe mode will be prompted to the user when an improper shutdown is detected for troubleshooting purposes, but it can also be manually activated from the help menu. Other new features in OBS Studio 30 include an updated graphical user interface with a redesigned status bar that provides users with more organized and structured information with more representative and recognizable icons, and a new option in the docks menu for full height docks so the dock can take up the entire height of the OBS window. Among other noteworthy changes, the OBS Studio 30 defaults to sorting audio-video encoder dropdowns by name, adds the ability to arrange filters using drag and drop, and enables GPU scaling for rescale output when possible, and adds logging for scene changes in studio mode. Moreover, it adds support for grayscale MJPEG in V4L/direct show sources, improves the settings interface of the text free type 2 source, adds IPv6 support for RTMP streaming output with IPv4 fallback for dual stacking streaming services, and adds the ability to set FFmpeg options for VA-API. Last but not least, OBS Studio 30 improves various functionality, such as the FFmpeg VA-API AMD encoder video quality, lossless recording with fragmented MP4/MOV, the VLC media source, and logging of high frame rate video capture devices on Linux. For more details, check out the release notes. Meanwhile, you can download OBS Studio 30 right now from the release notes page linked above as binaries for Ubuntu systems, as well as a source tarball if you fancy compiling it from sources. OBS Studio is also available for installation as a Flatpak app on virtually any GNU/Linux distribution from FlatHub.
Now, I know, Bill, you were saying that you had an issue earlier with the new
No,
OBS.
not well. I was just getting ready to say, I just got this update earlier today, and I hadn't played with it, and so that YouTube live control panel thing that it talked about kind of freaked me out a little bit because it's a separate pane because if you know anything about OBS Studio, you've got these panes lined up on the bottom of the screen. You got scene sources, audio mixer, scene transitions, and then the control buttons. Well, now if you are using a profile that live streams to YouTube, you get this YouTube live control panel, and it has to be, because it's new, it has to be signed into the YouTube account that you're streaming to, and that jolted me a little bit. All that being said, once I did it, I thought I needed to sign into that just to be able to stream to YouTube, but that's not the case. All it does is it gives me a little pane up here where I can see the quality of the connection. I can see the concurrent viewers, the chat rate, and the number of total views, and know whether or not the stream is working well, which is useful, I think.
Do you need painkillers for that?
I took some. They haven't kicked in yet. Now, so some of the other options that were listed here, like some of the improvements to the FFmpeg VA API, what that is the video acceleration API, which allows OBS Studio, instead of using the CPU to do the encoding, it can talk directly to the GPU, and that's what I've been using. That's what I've been using since I switched to a better video card, better AMD video card, which I'm going to talk about that incidentally here in a few minutes as well. But I am seeing some improvement just in the numbers I've got here in front of me as to like the overall quality. It's running at 60 frames a second at almost 10,000 kilobytes per second. I've not lost a single frame since we've started recording 2 hours and 16 minutes ago. So I am very happy so far with this update to OBS 30. It's just, if you're used to things looking a certain way and you've got everybody sitting in front of you on the screen waiting for you to get everything set up and get started, having new stuff pop up can freak you out a little bit. So be forewarned if you find yourself in a similar situation. But it's fine. It's great. It's a great update. OBS is an invaluable tool for content creation, no doubt about it.
And I forgot maybe you mentioned this, but I didn't hear it. Are you using the Flatpak, or what are you using?
Yes. I'm using the Flatpak, and that's what you have to use if you want the browser integration. What that is it's literally got a Chromium browser basically built right in as a plug-in, which is what I use to bring in the Video Ninja stream to the OBS Studio, and then pipes it out. I imagine it's that exact same technology they're using to make this YouTube live control panel as well.
Well, yet again, here's another. OBS is a transformative, sort of major open source project that is used by everyone, regardless of what system you're using, being distributed on Flatpak by the developer.
OBS has always been, and it continues to be, the example of a piece of software that is done correctly on Flatpak, because I have not had I've had some weirdness that Joe knows about, where if you're doing not a screen capture, but a window capture, and you want the audio from that window, sometimes you have to take the default
No.
stream and switch away from it and then switch back to it.
Right. If your audio changes on your PC, then it will randomly start like listening to your microphone instead of the desktop audio. So you have to go turn it off and turn it back on essentially to get the desktop audio outputting correctly.
Yep. But other than that, I mean, that's just a little bit of weirdness that we've just kind of gotten used to living with, I guess. But other than that, it's an example of it done right. So there you go.
Okay then, guys. We will now move on to the security and privacy news. Well, actually, there isn't any security and privacy news because we're all secure and we're all private. So we shall move swiftly on to the wanderings. So, bi-weekly wanderings. Take it away, Joe. No, Bill, actually. Yeah, sorry.
Give me 1 second here.
It's the last time we let you host.
Yeah, well, you know, there is such a thing as planned incompetence. Do you know what I mean? It's why my wife never asks. It's why my wife never gets me to make the tea, because she knows
Weaponized incompetence is the name of that, not planned incompetence. Weaponized.
I like that. I'm gonna have to use that.
Well, I mean,
well, you know, I would do the laundry, but you know,
yeah. I mean,
I
Joe,
always put the bleach in the darks.
I mean, Joe, you were in the military, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So apparently, the military is where the phenomenon of passive aggressiveness was first described.
Passive aggressiveness or malicious compliance.
So apparently, I know this only because it's just one of these random crap that I know. But the behavior of passive aggressiveness was first described by the U.S. Surgeon General in the aftermath of the Korean War, where he found that there were soldiers who didn't like their superiors and didn't want to follow orders, but obviously had no choice but to follow said orders, and so they would do it, you know, purposefully incompetently. There would be a lot of delaying. There'd be a lot of hindrances put in the way, and I just read that and I remember thinking to myself, this sounds like the health service to me. But anyway,
back to the wanderings.
Yes, let's get back to now that I have wandered very far from the reservation.
Now that Bill's prepped.
Yeah, now that Bill's finally ready.
I was just trying to put a little marker on my Audacity stream so that I knew where we were at. But anyway, okay. So as far as my wanderings go, I don't have much to report this time around. I don't know why I said that, because I kind of do.
Yeah, because you've written like 2 pages worth of stuff.
And I've actually got a little bit more that I didn't write here. I've done well in terms of things I've done. Other than to announce rather gleefully that I've begun adding proper chapters and clickable timestamps to the show notes and RSS feed. Listeners of the audio-only version of the show will now have 2 ways to navigate around in the show to get to the sections they want to focus on. The first episode to feature the new edition was 424, the last show that was released before this one, obviously. If you use a podcast catcher like AntennaPod, you will notice the chapters button. From there, you can choose all of the sections of the show in the show notes. The timestamps are also linked to the corresponding sections of the show. That way, you have a way to navigate the show, even if you're simply listening from the website. Much of the motivation behind this effort was the need to provide a way to skip to the next section if perhaps we ramble on in our wanderings about inflammatory topics.
What?
Yeah. Or if we're just simply discussing something listeners have little or no interest in. I was really excited to get it up and running, and I hope it's useful to folks. So there's that. Okay, so last week's Linux OTC was a lot of fun. We got into Majid's Farron OS installation, which I found interesting. That show just seems to run off the rails almost instantly. I'm really happy with the success of the show. when I decided to make OTC, I imagined a show with no real structure and no pre-decided topic. The show would have to live and die by the quality of the personalities of the hosts. And it's been really fun just relaxing and talking about Linux with friends and just allowing the show to flow in whatever direction the topics organically take us. And as of, I don't think we've ever had a problem with it whatsoever. It's always just, if we've had any trouble whatsoever, it's just figuring out a way to wrap it up, because it could go on for hours if
And
we
show
had
up for our streaming show. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's an
That's
ongoing thing.
consistently. That's
Yeah.
consistently the way I feel as we get to an hour or whatever we want to try to cap it at, and it's like, but we're just getting started.
Yeah,
you know,
just getting
like,
wound up.
Yeah.
Leo just keeps on talking.
I mean, it's all of us. You know,
We've never known that to happen, have we? Leo
He's-
talking?
No,
I-
never.
I'm really enjoying making the show. I mean, I'm enjoying mintCast. I enjoy all my shows, but I really kind of felt like OTC was just something to just. At first, it was just some silly little thing where we could just talk ad nauseum about whatever we had going on, and there's never nothing going on. So I think it's been successful. On a previous episode, I mentioned replacing my AMD Fire Pro W5100 with the Radeon Pro WX7100. I also described installing and using the proprietary AMD GPU driver. At first, I thought I was doing the right thing because I was getting some rather amazing FPS readings from GLX Gears, in the tens of thousands, in fact. Which, okay, whatever. Then, while trying to record an episode of mintCast, OBS Studio was unable to do simple window capturing. It could do screen capturing, but it completely dropped out. Anybody that was watching the YouTube, remember I was showing little screenshots of it, and it just didn't work. After some research, I found it was entirely because of the proprietary driver. I then returned to the open source driver, and all is well with the universe. From what I can gather, it has something to do with the new video encoding framework used by the proprietary driver, which is not supported by OBS. And that, when I wrote that, I had not updated to this new 30.0 yet. I may reinstall the proprietary driver and see if this new OBS works with it, and if it does, then it might be interesting to use. I'm sure there are ways to get things working, but for now I'm happy with the performance I'm getting from the open source driver, and that's true. If it doesn't work, I'm not struggling with going back to the closed or the open source thing. Because also, for whatever performance I'm missing out on, and it might only be just the OpenCL stuff that I'll probably never have any use for. At least my ethics are sound. So there is that. That's about all I've got. How about you, Joe?
Well, I set up Nextcloud so that I could actually use it. I've had the flat pack of Nextcloud desktop set up for a while, but I haven't slogged through the settings so that I could use anything other than the mintCast storage space as a backup from mintCast. Now, I wanted to test some things out on my own, so I had to figure it out. Now, the problem that I had was getting the trusted domain set up. Me and a friend spent multiple hours looking through and trying to get it figured out until the wee hours of the morning. Now, most of the documentation said to change the config file, but because this was the Flatpak, I simply couldn't find that config file. I finally found the commands for nextcloud.occ, which let me add trusted hosts, which allows me to access my Nextcloud storage from anywhere. So the command was sudo nextcloud.occ config system set trusted domains, and then the number and then the value. I also want to mention thanks specifically to Mordency, and yes, I do realize OCC was one of the suggestions that he had made, and we still couldn't figure that getting that command working at first, but we eventually did get it. Now, I was then able to also add that address to my phone and start syncing all of my photos and videos so that I once again am backing up my photos and videos locally. But that wasn't the main reason that I did this. I set this up so that I could use Joplin for a couple of weeks and see how I liked it compared to standard notes because, Eric was telling me how great Joplin was. So it took a bit more research and some command line tools um, to get the decrypted backup of all my standard notes and then convert them to something that Joplin could read, which I think was the Evernote format. I also then needed to parse those notes in a different way because Joplin does things a little bit differently. The files and sections is pretty cool in Joplin. But while I was syncing to Nextcloud the first time, there was a problem and I had to restart, which wiped out half my notes and I had to re-import them again and parse them all over again. With all that done, I was able to set up on my phone and also link to the Nextcloud instance. It syncs, but maybe not as fast as I would like. It does auto sync every 5 minutes, but sometimes I still need to force both machines to sync even after it does a supposed sync. Now, I also set up on a couple of my other computers. I don't need to set up Nextcloud on all of them, just have the WebDAV link ready to use and the passwords that I use for Droplet. The only issue that I have with that in particular is that every time I set up a new instance of Joplin, it adds another welcome notebook, which is annoying because I have to keep redeleting it. Now, I'm starting to get used to Joplin, and I think it is okay, even if the syncing is not real time. And if I have had some small issues with conflicting copies because I do switch machines fairly often, but I'm going to keep using it for now. And maybe in a couple of weeks, if I'm still using it, I'll come back and give you another report on it. It seems like a... Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, have you tried the web clipper? Because it's like Evernote, it has a web clipper extension for, and it's one of the reasons that Joplin has stuck around with me for so long is that in terms of like doing research on the web and stuff like that, you can very easily just either clip the URL of the page or like a full section of the page, or it adds a lot to the utility of Joplin. So
I will give that a try. Does it do images?
Yeah,
Okay.
It does all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Well, that's a big jump over standard notes right there. Is if it can put images right in the notes, then that would be good. But mostly I'm just using it right now for journaling and recipes and calorie tracking, and then storing common commands that I use in Linux for either Docker or something esoteric that I occasionally work on and need to go back and re-reference how I set it up. Okay, it seems like a decent tool so far, but with the setup of Nextcloud as well, it is a bit more work to get things up and running over something like standard notes. And one thing I dislike is that I cannot put an extra password protection on specific notes that I would like to. And there, as far as I know, there's no extension for that either. I did look, and basically I got told, no, it's not a thing right now. Now, moving on from that, I also decided to avoid watching YouTube videos for a while and see how that went, because I kept getting sucked down the YouTube hole. I was surprised how much more I was able to get done and the amount of audio that I was able to listen to in audiobooks, even, some podcasts, things like that. But I do still enjoy some of the things on YouTube. So I've gone back through and I started getting rid of some of the subscriptions that I don't enjoy as much. A lot of the political ones and some of the ones that are not as good as they used to be, much like LTT. Cough, cough. I was able to put together another set of those homemade earbuds with some of the drivers that I had sitting around. I did have some issues finding drivers that worked in my collection of parts and was a little frustrated the first time I came across one that did not work at all. And the trouble, And the entire troubleshooting process, because you don't think my driver's not working, you think I soldered this poorly. But it turned out that three of them that I had pulled out to test had the issue. But after the first two, I made sure to have a test set that I knew was working, so that I could make sure that it wasn't the connection on the MMCX side that was the issue. It took a while, but I did get it done. Now I have a gray set and an orange set, and I am going to be making my next set a black set. It's already printed and ready to go. I just need to pull the parts together and do the actual work, but it's all set up and ready to be done. Now, I also have to wonder how well a really cheap set of like in-ears would sound with new casing and some different padding, like $1.50 freaking earbuds that you get from the Dollar Tree or whatever. So I might try that out in the future, but I only have use for so many of these things. But still, it'll be fun to do. Moss.
Well, I took it upon myself to reorganize my external storage on my studio computer. I have two 512 gigabyte Silicon Power SSDs in my Wavelink ST336A toaster. My saved ISOs were taking up too much space in the downloads directory of SDB Speedy Gonzalez, and there just wasn't much on SDC Slowpoke Ramirez, but too much to just move the ISO directory over. By the end, Slowpoke Ramirez holds only the ISOs in the timeshift directory. Everything else, documents, pictures, music files, etc., is on Speedy Gonzalez. That took me a few hours. Copying from one drive to another drive, even if they're in the same box, it takes time. I'm running LMDE 6 Fay on my test laptop and also on my studio machine. On the studio computer, I've replaced Cinnamon with Mate using information given me by Londoner. I really like it, and I'm having trouble deciding whether I should just use it in place of Mint 21.2. I had to take a couple days off work as I'm only working 2 days per week max. That hurts, but we can get by. It's getting close to Suzanne's knee surgery, and there will be more days I will need to take off. Hopefully, she will be recovered by the time we go to our annual music convention in Atlanta the first weekend of January. And finally, Dale Dillon and I have been trying and failing to attract new writers or other contributors to the It's Moss website. At this time, it looks to be fading into obscurity, if indeed it ever arose from that level. We have had some excellent articles, especially Dale's foray into the computer desktop, which was also picked up by Full Circle magazine, and the first 2 episodes so far have been done here. That's it for me. Majid?
Okay, so apologies for missing the last episode. It was the kids' school holidays, and myself and the wife use it normally to get a couple of days away. So we went to Bristol, which is in the south of England, which has some very nice food, I must say. I seem to be playing distro hopping musical chairs. When I was last on, I was running Manjaro, Ferron, and Ubuntu GNOME. I'm still running Manjaro, Ferron, and Ubuntu GNOME, but on different devices. I find that Ferron is a good KDE spin based on Mint, especially since Mint don't do an official KDE spin anymore. I've put Manjaro on my main touchscreen laptop. We've discussed this before. I'm sure it'll come up again. GNOME makes a lot of sense on touchscreens. The Archway is something I'm going to have to get used to. It's the first time I've been running Arch properly for a very long time. Apparently Bill uses Arch. I mean, who knew that? So thanks to him for helping me out with a couple of jank. I put Ubuntu GNOME on my work machine. That's because it's a dual booter. I have Windows 11 on there as well. And I wanted a distro that works quite well with that. I do boot because the stylus input on Windows 11 is good and is not so good on any distro actually that I've ever used. And also because I use Samsung DeX as well. Also wanted to keep the secure boot working. However, I still get these BitLocker prompts whenever I try booting into the Windows partition. I'm looking for a good Linux email client that works with Exchange. I've been trying this for a few years now, so that my use of Windows is as minimum as possible. Evolution has a plugin, but it seems to be problematic in working. Thunderbird has a paid plugin, which I decided against because I don't want to pay. And so at the moment I'm using the web app. I had tried Bluemail, which is available for Linux. It's not fast and was a bit buggy, but I might look back into this. Like Bill said, the last episode of Linux OTC was good fun. We had some really good conversations. When it comes to buying of tech, cheap Android tablets have got good. I mean, like, really good. I bought an Honor Pad X9 for my daughter for about $150. It's basically all the computer she needs, whether it's for school, play, all she ever does is play that damned Roblox. Or messaging via Skype. I'm surprised kids are using it, but apparently it's what some her friends were using, which was okay. All right. I also think I'm the only guy who's liking the new Frasier, probably because it's very 90s, which is a good thing for me. I bought a Nissan Micra for my son, who hasn't yet passed his driving test, but he's got it next month, and I think he'll be all right. And I bought it off my cousin, and basically, I've come to the conclusion that if there's a nuclear holocaust tomorrow, the only thing that will survive will be cockroaches and Nissan Micras. It's a lovely little car. You know, it's almost 16 years old, but it drives quite nice. It's reasonably spacious. Surprised how good it is, really. Been listening to some
We
new
don't have that model, by the way.
Oh, don't you? All right.
Not by that name, at any rate.
Okay. I've been listening to some new albums. One is by Wargasm, which is kind of a UK duo. I suppose you could call it kind of new metal stroke electronica. Has a Fred Durst of Limp Bizkit fame cameo on it. The song's called "Bang Your Head," which is it's good fun. And I've been looking at a Bullet for My Valentine Deluxe reissue. Winter has started in the UK. This is relevant for me from a work perspective as well, because we've been getting quite a lot of sick kids coming through the hospital doors, and I've got my once in a month 24-hour shift tomorrow, which I'm not looking forward to. But hey ho, such is life. Well, that gets it for me. Go on, Eric. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, I haven't done a lot in the last few weeks. Had some health issues and spent some time in the hospital. But one of the things that was great was I was looking at tablet PCs, and I'd been agonizing over buying one for basically months. And I had finally ordered one, and it arrived the day that I went to the hospital, and my wife ended up bringing it to me. And so it was a way for me to just sort of kill time and do something constructive while I was sitting there doing nothing. So the good thing was that, yeah, I had some quiet time to deal with it. So what I ended up getting was a Dell Latitude 5290 2-in-1. It has an 8th gen Intel Core i5 8350U, which is a quad core chip, and it's up to 3.6 gigahertz, 15 watt TDP, so relatively efficient. It's got UHD graphics, 620, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 NVMe SSD, 12.3 inch screen with a 3.2 or 3:2 ratio, so sort of more of a square than a rectangle. 340 nits, so it's actually so bright I have to keep it like at 15-20%, which is kind of nice. So if I need it to be brighter, I can get that if I'm in bright sunshine or whatever. For being 5 years old, it's honestly pretty impressive in terms of the performance. I kind of talked about this yesterday on the prep stream for the show, where I kind of feel like Moore's Law have slowed down quite a bit in the last decade or so. And things that are older now just tend to still be pretty performant. Now, granted, this thing has 16 gigs of RAM and, a quad core processor and SSD, NVMe SSD. So it sort of hits all the high points of things that would affect performance. But ultimately, the fact that I can sit down, it came with Windows 10. I upgraded it to Windows 11 just to play around with it, installed Fedora 39, like I mentioned earlier, and it just runs it. I mean, there's no hesitation. It's not slow. Like, stuff opens immediately. It's really pretty impressive. So to be a small and thin and light device, and to be such a strong performer, it's really kind of impressive, because that's been my experience. I mentioned having that Lenovo 2-in-1 that was a Chromebook, that was actually, the hardware was so bad and so weak that it just basically made it impossible to use. And I don't fault Chrome OS for that. I think it was very much the hardware. So in this case, this thing is like really, really, very strong in that sense. And it's just shameless copy of a Microsoft Surface Book. I mean, it's literally, if you put them next to each other, they are so close that, I mean, even the kickstand, like everything is the same. So how Dell got away with that, not exactly sure. Maybe just being a big OEM for Microsoft all these years kind of gave them a little latitude to do that. Latitude. So,
I mean, I noticed that with the Lenovo tablets as well. I mean, I think with the Surface devices, there was a bit of the kind of, this is a reference device. And so, they actively were happy for OEMs to kind of take that form factor. So
I
I'm not
guess.
surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know, because it is definitely like absolutely shameless. So the only thing so far is that the battery is only 60% health, and so it's a 30 some watt, hour battery, and so that means it's basically 20 at this point, which is pretty for a full processor, full desktop experience x86 processor. That's I'm getting 3 hours, which is still not great. I mean, let's say I had a full health battery, that would mean that maybe I'd be getting 5 or 6, which is still not great for a tablet. But considering that it is like, I could see myself doing real like work on this thing, and I
It's a
did end up
beast.
doing. Yeah. So I mean, that kind of makes sense that it's not going to be as, it's not an Android device. It's not a that caliber of device. It's much more capable than that.
I mean,
So
we did a episode, I think, 3 months ago, where we looked at kind of optimizations and things that you can do to try and improve battery life, because generally
yeah,
Linux battery life isn't the best compared
yeah, and I
to.
mean, no, you're right. It isn't, and I, honestly though, but even under Windows, it's maybe an extra half hour, 45 minutes. So it's not like it's just Linux. I mean, it's really more or less because you're running a full desktop or a full laptop, grade system in this tiny little package. And it's nearly silent. The fans do come on when they need to. And actually, Windows, I've noticed that playing the hardware acceleration in Windows is such that it really is kicking up, creating a lot of heat. The fans have to run, and it tends to do a better job of streaming video under Linux for whatever, for what that's worth. But just a couple thoughts, like using vanilla GNOME on a touch device. This is literally the first time that I've really used Linux with a touch device. All of my laptops have not had touch screens. I don't have a touchscreen monitor for my desktop, and so this is like my first experience with Linux on a touchscreen, and in particular GNOME. And all of a sudden, it makes sense. It's like, oh, okay, I get why everything's off the screen, why there's no taskbar, and there's just this, the strip at the top, and there's great gesture support, and like there's just it makes so much more sense using it as a tablet than it does as a desktop operating system. And so it's kind of interesting that maybe they were just that far ahead of the curve, but without strong adoption with touchscreens, or maybe people really do enjoy having touchscreens on their laptops, and they will reach up and touch the screen to interact with it or something like that. I've kind of found myself doing that, where even if I have the keyboard uh, cover attached and I'm using it with the touchpad and stuff like that, I'll still reach up And to get to like the system menu to, turn on Bluetooth or something, like I'll tap up in the corner with my finger instead of using the touchpad. So, it all of a sudden, like I said, just makes way more sense than it ever has before. And I've actually found myself enjoying using it just in its sort of vanilla state. I've done very little in terms of extensions or changing anything. So yeah, the other side of this is that it's Wayland. So Fedora 39 is Wayland only. And I've had no problems whatsoever in terms of, I thought, global shortcuts were going to be a problem because that, is something that I tend to use. Doesn't seem to be an issue. I thought maybe some of the applications I might use would have a problem on Wayland, and I know that there are certainly still some that are not quite ready, but nothing that I've been using has had that problem. And so it's proven to me that Wayland is much more mature and further along than I had expected. So yeah, I mean, all in all, it's been a really positive experience. And to get this machine cost, I think about $2,200 about 5 years ago, and I got it for $145. And it's such a capable system. Like, I'm now thinking, oh, I think I'll probably get one of these for my daughter for schoolwork because it's beautiful. You just pick it up. It's so lightweight. I mean, it's like 2 or 3 pounds. It's got a really nice keyboard cover. It's not the best in the world, but I mean, you can type on it pretty well. The touchpad works pretty well, especially under Linux. It's great. What a value for that price. I mean, the performance for what you're spending is amazing.
Yeah, let's save
all
the
around
rest
good
of that
stuff.
conversation until we do it for an innards. So I know you and I want to just go off on the topic.
Yeah, I mean, I would go off on the topic as well. That is something that we are planning to do an innards on at some point.
Speaking of which, I'm good. Why don't we go ahead and switch to it then?
Wrap.
Okay, so housekeeping and
we got vibrations, and check this out before housekeeping.
Sorry, hold on. Okay, vibrations from the ether. I haven't received anything. Has anybody else received anything?
Nope. No love.
Nope.
Okay.
There's just a sad face there.
Okay. When it comes to check this out, a couple of links in the show notes. There's Moss's rather spectacular House Linux shirt, as well as the Tuck Super Key keyboard stickers. And
the House Linux shirt is on a Game of Thrones style, although they do have the swords inverted with the pommels up.
I ordered 2 of them.
And Mint has apparently restored the mintCast link on their website, which is cool. We did actually have a discussion with Clem, the benevolent dictator, on Discord, which was quite cool. Housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us your email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram and Discord. Or post directly at mintcast.org. The next episode will be at 2 p.m. US Central Time on Sunday, November 26, 2023. And there's a link to get that converted to your time zone in the show notes. Next roundtable live stream, 2 p.m. US Central Time on Saturday, November 18th, 2023. There's a link in the show notes to get that converted to your time zone. Next roundtable live stream, 2 p.m. US Central Time on Saturday, December the 2nd, 2023. And get the round. And then there is a link in the show notes to get that converted to your time zone. Live stream information is available at mintcast.org/livestream. So, wrapping up. Go on, Joe.
Well, if you like the sound of my voice, I'm on a couple other podcasts. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, which is tllts.org. I'm on Linux Lugcast, which is linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. Boss?
You can hear me on Full Circle Weekly News every week, and Distro Hopper's Digest. You can email me at bardmoss@pm.me. My Mastodon is at zyvala@hosttux.social, and my other contact information can be found at itsmoss.com. Bill?
Well, you can email me. I'm Bill at mintcast.org. I'm Bill_H on Discord. At WC Hauser3 at thostodon.org, and that's on Mastodon. Also, check out my other two podcasts, Linux OTC and Three Fat Truckers. How about you, Majid?
So, I am on, you can email me at drmajid@mincast.org. I'm still on Twitter. I'm at atypical doctor 870 on there. At atypical doctor on Instagram and Threads, and there is the Atypical Doctor podcast on Spotify. Go ahead, Eric.
Moss, you can change that Twitter to X all you want. It will always be Twitter. You can hear me and see me on this and the Linux OTC podcast, as well as Linux Saloon and Linux Slugcast streams and the Distro Hoppers Digest podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I can be reached by mail at eric@mintcast.org or most social media platforms. Check the show notes for specific links.
Okay. So before we leave, we want to make sure we acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Someone, basically Bill, for our audio editing, archive.org for hosting our audio files, Hubstar for our logo, InitRD for the animated Discord logo, Londoner for being just the main man and for our time syncs and other various contributions. Special shout out to Special Bill for hosting the server, which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio. The Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks Clam.
And Co.
And that's a wrap.
It's a wrap. Majid, you were sounding like you were wearing out there.